If I can ask members of council to please come into the council chambers. Okay, members of council, if you can please take your seats. We do have quorum. This meeting is now resumed. Members, before the recess, council was debating the mayor's first key item, MM 7.13, on impact of the 2019 provincial budget on the City of Toronto. We will return to that item after release of member holds. Any releases? Councillor Filion.
On page 3, Executive 5.2, lessons learned third-party advertising in the 2018 municipal election. I can release that.
Okay, on page 3, EX 5.2, Councillor Filion is releasing. All in favor? Recorded vote. Recorded vote.
Councillor Carroll, please.
The item carries 20-1.
Okay, Councillor Filion.
5, PH 5.7, Toronto Local Appeal Body Chair's Annual Report. I can release that
I'm
as well.
sorry, I didn't get the page number.
Page 5,
Page 5.
PH 5.7, Toronto Local Appeal Body. Can release it.
Okay, on page 5, PH 5.7, all in favor? Carried. Councillor Carroll.
Yes, Madam Speaker, I spoke to you before we broke for lunch. Item CC 7.12, the Carilion Canada versus the City of Toronto. I think I spoke to you before lunch about making that a time sensitive for going in for confidential, and also so that we could schedule the time of the outside solicitor help.
Yes, you did, and so the only time we can do it is tomorrow, after the ombudsman presentation.
I'm looking towards a city solicitor to see if that sounds good.
Well, that's the only time we have.
Fine by me. I'm just
Okay.
trying to give effect to
All right.
something the public service asked for.
Unless members want to release it. Councillor Ford.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm prepared to release two items. First, on page 4 at the top of the page, AU 2.6, Auditor's General Response to the Audit Committee's request on the outstanding audit recommendations, which are of greatest concern.
Okay, so you release it?
Yes, Madam Speaker.
Recorded.
Okay, recorded vote, that's on page 4, AU 2.6, recorded vote.
Councillor Carroll, please. And Councillor Filion, please.
Put your name on.
The item is adopted unanimously, 24 in favor.
Thank you. Councillor Colle, if you want to release an item, just put your name up. Okay. Councillor Ford, do you have another one? Yep.
Yes, Madam Speaker. Just one more on page number 8, near the bottom of the page, CC 7.5, appointment of public members to the Toronto Community Housing Corporation.
Okay, on page 8, CC 7.5, Councillor Ford is releasing. Recorded vote.
Did you go and have a look at them?
Councillor Filion, please. Councillor Perks, please.
The item is adopted unanimously, 25 in favor.
Thank you. Councillor Layton.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. I have two to release. First, on page 3, AU 2.2, Fleet Services Operational Review.
Okay, on page 3, AU 2.2, Councillor Layton is releasing. On favor? Recorded? Okay, recorded. .3 was not held. Oh, we brought, so we have to, okay.
Deputy Mayor Min Wong, please.
The item is adopted unanimously, 26 in favor.
Okay, on AU 2.3, recorded vote.
Councillor Fletcher, please, and Councillor Layton.
Councillor Perruzza, please.
The item is adopted unanimously, 26 in favor.
Thank you. Councillor Colle.
Yes, Madam Speaker. I'm happy to release the guns, EX 5.7. You want to hold on to the guns? Okay. You got to know when to hold them.
I sang that last week. Come on. Sorry, Madam Speaker, I have another item to release.
Yeah, okay, so are you going to continue holding it in your name, Councillor Colle? You don't want it? Councillor Layton.
Yes, thank you. This one's on page 9, CC 7.5, 306, 310, 314, and 326 Davenport Road zoning bylaw amendment. There's a confidential attachment with recommendations from staff. I'll move the recommendations.
On page 9, CC 7.7, Councillor Layton is releasing. On favor? Carried. Are there any more?
Just if I may, I sent
Councillor Layton?
Thank you. I sent an amendment to the clerks for CC 7.10, but I suspect it's a confidential circulation. If you could circulate that, and I'll release it after, that'd be great.
Okay. Thank you. We do have some motions that we will be adding. Councillor Perruzza.
Yes, yeah, there it is, Speaker. It's right before you, and would you like me to read it?
Well, just
Oh,
give us the
yes,
title.
this is the, gosh, who is it now? One of the big oil companies is building a new pipeline, basically that goes from, this is not Line 9. This is a new one that goes from Hamilton. It'll go all the way to the depot at Keele and Finch, and it's going to cross a great deal of municipal infrastructure, including the LRT line on Finch Avenue and some other places as well. So this basically just is an introduction of a motion that asks the city, our city solicitor, and our city staff to be participants in that exercise, in that process, so that you can.
All in favor? Recorded. Somebody asked for recorded vote.
Councillor Fletcher, please.
Councillor Robinson, please. And Mayor Tory, please.
The motion to add the item to the agenda carries 25-1.
Councillor Colle. There it is on the screen.
Yeah.
Councillor Colle?
Yes, this is an urgent matter, and yeah. So just ensuring that this comes at this time because of the critical time that we're looking at here. Then this is due in the next day or so. So we've got
Okay,
it.
on favor? Carried. Councillor Matlow, you have two.
I move the motion before us.
On favor? Carried. You have another one.
I move this as well.
It's a TLAP, okay.
Incorrect.
On
Correct.
favor? Carried. Councillor Cressy.
Thank you, Speaker. It's urgent as the time is required to fit up the building on Lakeshore Boulevard.
On favor? Carried. Councillor Pasternak. Point of order, Councillor Wong-Tam.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I have a declaration of interest on the last item. I'm a board member of the Toronto Biennial of Art, and our organization is a proponent for the motion. And I will fill out the form. I just didn't quite get to it yet.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Who was? Councillor Pasternak.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Speaker. The urgency of this is we want to make sure that the discussion of all aspects of Section 42 are included in the ongoing discussions among ourselves and between the province. It's important to get the motion passed now so it can make it onto the agenda.
All in favor? Carried. Councillor Layton.
Yes, thank you very much. I was confused as to what I was being asked to do, but this is to introduce the motion before you. It has to do with a hearing before the LPAT,
All in favor?
before the TLAP.
Thank you. That's it? Okay. So we'll now go back to the mayor's key item. We'll put the speakers on the screen. Councillor Pasternak to speak.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have a motion. Put it on the screen, please. So when we were asking questions of staff, I ran out of time when I went to ask the solicitor whether, in fact, these Toronto Public Health cuts violate the Canada Health Act. So since I wasn't able to ask, I'd like the city solicitor, to report back with the package in front of us to Executive Committee on whether any aspects of these cuts violate the Canada Health Act. The Canada Health Act, and I quote, is to protect, promote, and restore the physical and mental well-being of residents of Canada and to facilitate reasonable access to health services without financial or other barriers. The provinces get block grants called the Canada Health Transfer as long as they adhere to the provisions of the Canada Health Act. What we're looking from our city solicitor is whether, in fact, these cutbacks from Toronto Public Health violate the provision of the Act, and therefore they would be reduced dollar for dollar on the transfer to the province. Going back to the subject before us, specifically on the cuts to Toronto Public Health, it's perceived by many at Queen's Park that the funds that they're giving to these vital programs are actually costs. But when you look closely at them, they are investments. When you look at student nutrition, it's not just to feed hungry kids, it's not just to make sure that they learn, but it's also to teach kids good eating habits and smart choices. And in the long run, that reduces diabetes and obesity, reduces hospitalization, and reduces pressures on our health care. When it comes to daycare, everybody knows that investments in daycare are a financial driver of the economy. It allows people to go into the workforce. It allows people to go back to school to upgrade their education. And when you have people in the workforce, when you have a highly educated population, you're able to generate economic activity. And when it comes to the hospital, the restaurant industry, it's an unknown what these cuts could do to our vibrant restaurant industry in Toronto. Could the delay of certification cause restaurants to close? Could it prevent restaurants from opening? Could it discourage customers from going in these restaurants? The implications of these cuts could be catastrophic, as we don't know exactly what the implications would be, but the industry itself would be at grave peril if those cuts were made. Finally, I would refer to a couple of quotes, and I'm not going to mention the names of members of council, who said the following. Doug Ford's election is terrible news for the residents of our city. There's no sugarcoating it. On every file of important, whether it's affordable housing, or minimum wage legislation, or transit funding, this is a disaster. Another member of this council said it's going to be a community leveling organization for protests for years. It's going to be a very ugly 4 years. The Conservative platform has $8 to $10 billion hole, and that's going to come out of all the things that affect the city of Toronto. Now, these comments were not made in the last 48 hours. They were not made in the last 6 weeks. They were not made in the last 2 months. These comments were made on Friday, June the 8th, the day after the election. Doug Ford wasn't even sworn in as Premier, and the rhetoric started. And I urge all of us to just cool it now. Let's tone down the rhetoric, and let's work with Queen's Park to make sure that we get the best deal for the City of Toronto and the best deal for the residents of Toronto.
Councillor Perks.
Councillor Filion's instructed me to tone down the rhetoric. We as a council have a duty, of course, to fight this horrible budget from the province of Ontario, and I'm glad that we've taken that up. But as civic leaders, we also have a duty to be clear with the people that we represent about what's going on. And I think on that, we've so far missed the mark. Unlike what some have suggested, I do not believe that this is somehow a vendetta on the part of the Premier against this council or some members of this council. Unlike what some members of the Provincial Caucus have said, I don't believe that this has anything to do with the provincial deficit, and I'll come back to that in a moment. It's true that the retroactivity and the fact that the cuts to Toronto are larger make it more difficult for us. But if you look at it, in large part, in its essential nature, what is being done to the City of Toronto now is pretty much the same as what was done when Mike Harris was Premier. The underpinnings are the same. This is not about Doug Ford. This is about a radical conservative agenda aimed at destroying the social safety net and the services that we share together as Torontonians and Ontarians to make life more livable and better for our neighbours, our family, the people we work with, and ourselves. When the budget was introduced, there weren't just losers. There were winners as well. Big business got a series of tax breaks totaling in the range of about $5 billion. A planned tax surcharge on the highest income Ontarians that would have raised $275 million was eliminated. In the new planning law, it's Christmas for real estate speculators. They will make a fortune. There really are winners and losers in this radical conservative agenda. For most of us, the services that we rely on, being able to get to work on a public transit system that's well run and well funded, being able to put a child in childcare so that both adults in a family can work, being able to rely on a good school system so that you don't have to put your kids into a private education system, being able to rely on a public health system that makes sure that those kids are healthy and get something good to eat while they're at school. These are services that we share. They're things we provide to each other. Without those services, most of us, 4 out of 5 of us, would be unable to enjoy the benefits and wealth that the City of Toronto has. Our careers would be limited. We would not have the leisure time that we have. We would be sicker. And because we don't have the kind of wealth that the people who are benefiting from Doug Ford's budget have, we wouldn't have any other option. You can't, if you don't own a house in some other part of the continent, you got nowhere to run to when there's an epidemic. If you can't afford a private school, you're going to have to put your kids in a school system where things like music lessons or special supports for kids with special needs have evaporated. If you can't own 2 cars in your family, or maybe even not one, you're going to watch a transit system fall in decline, make it harder and harder for you to get to work every day. This budget, the attack on these services, is not an attack on us, the City of Toronto. This is an attack on everyone in the province of Ontario who doesn't happen to be wealthy. This is very much about a radical conservative view that society is comprised of winners and losers. And this budget is aimed at making sure that the winners win even bigger and the rest of us become losers. We have to fight it, it's true, but we also have to be honest with the people that we represent about what it is we're fighting. We're fighting an agenda that is similar to the one that we're witnessing down south. We're fighting an agenda that's the same as the one in Alberta. We're fighting the one that Farage and his party are pushing in the United Kingdom. It's a concerted and deliberate attack on the idea that when we share the burdens, we all do better. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fletcher.
Very much. I just want to clarify, I was asking the medical officer of health about the student nutrition program, which I've worked on for many years, as have many of us, in order to make sure that every day children are fed when they're at the place they have to go every day, which is school. And the apparently provincial dollars haven't been clawed back yet, but the cuts to our public health will end up diminishing our ability to be as robust as we have been in feeding kids. And I think even in the Ford government here at City Hall, that was something that actually was rolled back because people feel so strongly about not taking food out of the mouths of kids that need to eat. They're not eating at home, they're low-income kids, and they need food. They need the snack or they need the lunch. These are very important programs, and I hope that we are able to figure out how to maintain our contribution as best as possible, and that our staff at Public Health are working with the foundations, Toronto Foundation for Student Success, the Angel Foundation, and others, to really look at what the impact of this is going to be, and as a number of councillors have said, to let people know what the impact will be, and to let those who are eating at school every day to know what the impact of these cuts will be on the very programs that we hold so dear. I have been following this, as is everyone, and I was really and truly shocked to hear about the cuts to childcare. It just seems like kids are in the sights of this government at Queen's Park, whether they mean to or not, but they are in the sights. We're talking about food programs in schools, and it's very important for their outcomes, and childcare, not just for kids, but for those parents who need to go to work. And we did hear from Children's Services, from Ms. Gray today, that over probably 5,000 of the subsidies are lone parent families. They rely on those subsidies in order to be able to go to work, to bring in enough money to pay the rent, to move ahead, to save a little bit for their children's education, but that's their lifeline. It means that 5,000 people could simply be taken out of the workforce, back into their home with their kids. And really and truly, I can't tell you how important it is. Childcare is so important for women to get out in the workforce, to stay in the workforce, to have a career for themselves, to build some equity for their pensions. So I don't want to go into the pension discussion, but I really do want to say that this is a real big blow for kids, because early learning is so important. If for some reason they cannot stay in childcare, early learning are the determinants of how well you will be doing later. And Fraser Mustard and his groundbreaking work said 0 to 6, the most important years for your child and mine. And at licensed childcare with subsidized spots, that is where children learn best in good care. So I'm very, very concerned, because she said they are going to be in the places in this city where we have the highest levels of poverty. So I'm sure that our councillor, who is the anti-poverty advocate, poverty reduction advocate, is going to take this by the horns and do something about that in those areas with those 11 MPPs who have childcare centres there, and many of them are in parts of the city that are underserved and have a lot of low-income people. So these kids are low income, but so are the mums or single dads that are using these very important services. It really is a matter of your life being turned around either in a good way to have childcare, or simply turned around in the worst way possible to lose your subsidy and not be able to go to work. So I do think we have to fight these much harder. We have to engage the parents who have their kids in childcare and bring people together to simply say no, particularly with those MPPs that think that these are harmless cuts. they are not harmless cuts. They're very deep and very severe, sometimes for those people who can least afford it.
Thank you. Councillor Carroll.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm going to have to go back to a comment one of my colleagues made, which was that we in this room need to calm down the rhetoric, and maybe they need to calm down the rhetoric a little on the other side. I have to take issue with that. On behalf of our public service, I made a tweet about it last weekend, and it got around. I know it resonated with Ontarians. There was a tweet from a minister of the provincial government that actually said that our public service was engaging in rhetoric. What's on the floor right now, the item on the floor right now is a factual item. These are the facts of the budget proposed to us. And it is the role of the public service to present to us the facts. And that's all we're talking about today. Now, we've painted pictures here today, painted pictures of the impact. And you could call them anecdotal, you could call them looking into the future, but this room is full of people who can look into the future. There aren't a lot of us left in this room. Councillor Filion, Councillor Min and Wong, but a number of staff who actually were here during SARS, who were here when we had to rebuild from that, who were here when they very responsibly took the funds that began to roll back to us. After the healthcare premium went into place and municipal health authorities started to get the 75-25 shared relationship, they were very careful about how they used it. And how did all of the 100% programs end up in the public health? 100% funded. Did we beg them? Did we say, we can't afford to spend a single penny on infectious disease control. We're begging you, please, you fund this 100%. No. That was their responsibility. They knew it at the provincial level, and they asked us to deliver it because what we demonstrated during SARS is it's the on-the-ground health authority that can do that for you best. There's no question, Madam Speaker, that it's better funded out of the income tax base. Healthcare really is the type of thing that ought to come out of wealth redistribution, and that's what income tax is. That is the opposite of what property tax is. Property tax is not about wealth redistribution. This city is full of people who bought houses for $60,000 that are now worth $2.5 million, and they're struggling to figure out how to meet their current value assessment on those taxes. That's not what healthcare dollars should be drawn from. So we're making a massive departure from what we know is the best pot from which to pull healthcare dollars and saying, cities, just dig it out of your pockets from people's property assessments. That makes absolutely no sense, and it's being sort of lost in the transition. It's good to have these impact statements. It's good to talk about the vulnerable people being hurt directly by the programs, but you're actually hitting every single Torontonian if you're going to make this policy change and begin to pull from the property tax what should rightly be taken from, is taken all over the world from, income tax. And that's what's going on here. And when we don't meet it, they'll come down and withdraw from what is sacred in Canada, healthcare and preventative healthcare, by saying that it's somehow our fault if we don't come up to meet them with the wrong source of revenue. The same is true in childcare. In the childcare system, they had certain goals they wanted to meet, and so they 100% funded them. We didn't beg them, hey, can you please give us some money and we'll check everyone's teeth? Can you please give us some money and we'll change the way we pay childcare workers? The province decided that they should do it. They gave themselves the mandate of providing a childcare system, and they asked us to deliver it because we're best placed to do so. But now they're saying, no, take that out of the property tax base too. Take it all out of the property tax base. Madam Speaker, we've been here before. You were in office. You were a mayor when they first started saying, let's stop paying for things out of what is the obvious source of revenue, income tax, and just throw it down on the cities. And that's what's happening again. And so we talk about the vulnerable people. That's why I focused in on the transition child benefit. That's going to hurt immigrants, refugee claimants, people sitting in shelters and hotels right now that will eke together those transitional child care supplements to pay for housing. But it's the income tax change and policy that's going to hurt every single one of us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Councillor Filion.
Thank you. I'd like to begin by saying that I totally support the mayor's plan and thank him for taking a strong stand. I think people really need to know how arbitrary and extreme these cuts are, and people also need to know which of their elected representatives, especially their provincial elected representatives, are standing up for this city and the people who live in it. Why is all this happening? I have a different approach than Councillor Perks, who thinks it's a radical conservative agenda. I don't think that. I think it's a radical conservative premier. There's really only two words to explain what's going on, and the first one is Doug and the second is Ford. Why did he want to be premier and mayor before that? It's simply because he wants power, and most people want political power to do something constructive, and people can have different ideologies about what that is, and sometimes something that looks very conservative, that's somebody's legitimate view for how to do something constructive. This shouldn't be mistaken for any of that. This is not that at all. This is a purely Doug Ford thing. If virtually anybody else that got elected in that caucus was the leader, this would not be happening. Doug Ford wants to dismantle government. I think he learned that at his father's knee. And what better way to dismantle government than to be the leader of the government and preside over its dissolution? And that's what he's really trying to do here. Power also allows him to reward friends and punish enemies. We'll be dealing with planning changes tomorrow, which we could talk more about the rewarding friends. The punishing the enemies, it's just part of Doug's nature. He wants to establish who's got the power, who's the boss. And I think if he could, he would introduce an omnibus bill that would make him the premier, the mayor, and the prime minister all at the same time. I probably shouldn't give him any ideas. But these cuts really allow him to achieve all of his objectives. He dismantles government, and he gets to show who's boss, who's really in charge of this city, because unfortunately, as is becoming painfully apparent, the province does have total control over us. And if there's a lot of weeping and gnashing of teeth on the left, then all the better. That just makes his day brighter. So this circling back to supporting the mayor's approach, the premier is certainly not going to stop this of his own volition. In fact, we could expect another 3 years of it, and he will have a good time doing it. The only thing that will curb the excesses of it would be the same thing that curbed the excesses of the Ford government a little over a year into the first term, when a lot of people of conscience who had voted with him for the first year or so said, you know what, hold on, this is going too far. There's stuff here that doesn't make sense. This is not what our public bargained for. And people who had supported his agenda stopped. And that happened, I think by the time we were into the budget on the second year. Much harder to do that with a provincial government in party politics with the majority government. But it's really the only way we have any chance at all of doing that is to call people out when they try to do, when they try to spin things in a way that is just not at all accurate, as the mayor did this week. And we just have to let the people know how it really is. And, you know, I have no doubt that it's a very small percentage of the population that would support these types of actions, and we need to get them to rise up as much as we can.
Thank you. Councillor Wong-Tam.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I also would like to thank staff for their hard work on getting the report out before us. I also recognize that the content in the report is rushed. Literally, an announcement comes out on a Thursday or a Friday, and then you're trying to respond within the public service to make sense of it, provide briefing notes for us, and so forth and so forth. So I do know that there is a sense of panic on the floor. We're all very calm right now, but I know that's certainly not the way you're feeling, and that's right across every single division that's being impacted. So I want to say thank you very much to our city manager and everyone in the top tier of leadership for that very steady hand on the till. I also want to thank the mayor for his motion. I think that this is a good step in the right direction in dealing with what is going to be an avalanche of other bad announcements that will be coming forward. I think that we need to also be mindful that toning down the rhetoric is not necessarily going to win the next election in 2022. This is not a sprint anymore. This is now a marathon. Anyone suggesting that perhaps next year, you know, all the bad stuff is done this year, then next year might be better, I think we're going to be in for another awakening. I believe that, you know, a response with a broad media campaign is certainly helpful. But it's actually not the only thing that we should be doing, and I certainly have no qualms about spending our dollars on that campaign. But the mayor hit it right on the head the last time when he spoke about making sure that the MPPs hear it on their doorsteps when they in their own communities. To me, that requires a much larger coordinated coalition. And that may mean for some of the members of council, Madam Speaker, that they're going to have to start working with unions and trade unionists and civil society groups that they don't normally get along with. Because we're all in this one together at this point in time. And that means working with our friends from CUPE 79 and 416. It's about working with CUPE Ontario. It's about working with OPSU. It's about working with everybody who's willing to work with us in order for us to really send a message home. And we will not have the resources to reach into every single MPP's riding. And I think this is where Councillor Filion is absolutely correct. The Premier is only one person, but should the caucus that supports him and the government that supports him be able to sort of shake loose some of those grips, if that were to happen, that will certainly send a message to him. But that won't happen if the coalition of civil-minded, forward-thinking individuals are divided. We cannot do this by ourselves. And that means that those 40,000 students that rose up and walked out of school, we're going to have to work with those individuals, those students. We're going to have to work with the teachers. We're going to have to work with the nurses. We're going to have to work with the business owners who are fair-minded and public broad sense of engagement that they believe in. We're going to have to work with our ratepayers organizations. We're going to have to work with the activists, all the activists that sometimes you don't like to hear from. You're going to have to work with them too, because that's what it's going to take for us to shift the ground politically. And it's good to start it with a media campaign. We can buy a few billboards, put up a few shelter ads, but in order for this to really make a difference, for the ground to shake in front of Queen's Park, we're going to have to put aside some of those differences, and we're going to have to work together. And that's the only way between now and 2022 that I see a path out of this. So this is not about political theater. There have been times where we've been accused of raising oppositional voices and saying that's political theater. It's about standing up for your values and saying, this is the line in the sand. You cross it, we're now going to be embroiled into a battle, because these are our values. And if for a moment of time, if this is truly Team Toronto, then Team Toronto is going to have to stand up for the most vulnerable in Ontario. And that means that we're going to have to look right into the faces of those individuals who will be most impacted. And there will be a gender and equity impact. These decisions will impact people differently. Sure, the rich will get richer, but they will feel it, but not the way the poor will feel it, and certainly not the way women will feel it, and certainly not the way racialized communities will feel it, and that's the fight. So if we're going to do this together as Team Toronto, I'm going to suggest that we figure out how to work together with all the other civil society partners that are out there that are asking for leadership. And we need to come to the table with that as a response. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Colle to speak.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I really commend the mayor for this motion and his really battle for the people of Toronto. He's battling for the people of Toronto. And I want to thank him last week. He and Councillor Kristyn and the Medical Officer of Health, Eileen de Villa, came to a town hall in my riding to speak about the importance of public health. And Councillor Matlow showed up. And I think they demonstrated their passion for standing up for something that is very important to vulnerable people in Toronto. That's what they're doing. Because they're not going to be able, the mothers losing daycare, childcare, the children losing the breakfast program, they aren't going to call their MPP. They aren't going to call the media. So thankfully the mayor and leadership shown by other councillors is something that's helping people who cannot stand up and fight for themselves. And I think we've got to remind ourselves of that. I just also, some references to SARS and reference to Walkerton. Well, I don't think 90% of the people in Toronto even know what that is. They don't know. They're just words. So if we start saying, well, public health is important because SARS happened, you ask anybody in the street, SARS, what's that? So we have to perhaps remind people of the critical importance that public health is and tell them what happens. And the mayor knows that full well. I remember coming down from Queen's Park to support the City of Toronto because businesses were closing. All of Chinatown, not only in Toronto, but all over the York region, all the Chinese business people were basically afraid of losing their businesses because nobody was going. And so we came to encourage people. We all went to a restaurant up in Scarborough as elected officials saying, please don't be afraid, go, because it's going to make it worse if you don't stand up and support people in these hard times. And Toronto made it all over the newscast internationally. You know what the word was? Don't go to Toronto because you're going to get a disease, an epidemic. Don't go. So that reality has got to be shared with the people of Toronto who've never experienced it, forgotten it. Or Walkerton, when 7 people died and 500 people were in kidney dialysis in Walkerton. They don't know that. They don't know about Walkerton. What's that? So that's why it's so critically important for us to get that message out. And I think the way we can help is really letting people know what's in the budget and what's in the cuts. So that's why I'm trying to do my public town halls. I'm doing another one Thursday night on the Developer's Dream Legislation 108. I'm doing one on that because that means, the end of development charges that help build community centers. It means that the OMB can override heritage designation. So forget your heritage designation. It's going to be meaningless. So I'm doing a meeting on that Thursday night. And I think that's the job we can do well as councillors. Have these town hall meetings and do them in communities where people are looking for information and share that information, because it's not going to be done by the media, because the media is also overloaded. They can't keep up with the pace of change and turmoil. I agree with what Councillor Perk said about this is a radical agenda, but I also want to say to him, the radical agenda also seems to focus on the people of Toronto. Why rip up the Toronto Transit Plan, cut $1 billion of everyday transit maintenance, $180 million cuts from the Toronto budget, disproportionately. The takeover of planning in Toronto. I mean, sure, the thing about Mike Harris, at least he cut everybody evenly across the province. But this guy wants to be, I don't know, he wants to be the mayor of Toronto. He's just gone nuts in terms of these cuts to the engine of the province. Why would he cut? And you know who should speak up? And I really challenge the corporate interest in Toronto and Ontario, the business people. Why the silence as public health is being cut? Why don't they stand up and say this is not good for the economy to cut childcare and public health? Let them stand up and speak up for once, not just elected officials.
Thank you. Councillor Ford.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. You know, in this conversation, I think many councillors in here want to paint, you know, the skies are turning black, everything is turning over. And I really do call it for what it is to me, to many people. Hearing, you know, going back to the 1990s, reliving the days on Walkerton and SARS and the fear-mongering that is going along with that, I think is outrageous. I think it is outrageous to the people we represent. I think that fear-mongering, I don't think has any place in here. You know what? You know, let me do my fear-mongering. $347 billion of debt in the province of Ontario. I have the pleasure of being a millennial, 25 years old, and I will admit that scares me. And I think as this government is moving ahead, not on a radical conservative agenda, absolutely not. I don't believe that for one bit. Madam Speaker, I don't appreciate being
Councillor
heckled.
Perusa, please stop interrupting.
Madam Speaker, on a point of order, I have sat in this chamber quietly, respectfully, over all the other members, seeing what they had to say. I would appreciate the same respect.
Please.
So it's $347 billion of debt. That scare me. That scare my generation. And I think people of my generation and the people in the city of Toronto want to be living in a city that has a good, strong financial and a province that is very stable and financially stable. You know what? But I'm not here to defend. Okay, Madam Speaker, another point of order. I would ask for the peanut gallery to stop.
Okay, Councillor Ford, I'll put your time on hold. I'm sorry, I didn't hear anything. Members of council, please, if you would stop interrupting and let Councillor Ford speak. Please. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. You know, I am going to be brief here. I think we need to turn our attention to what we can do as a city, as the economic engine of Ontario, to be fiscally responsible. Right on this agenda alone, the Auditor General has a report with 227 recommendations from the Audit Committee, which the main driver of them is cost savings that have not been implemented. Maybe we need to turn our attention to that. How do we find these efficiencies? I watched the Board of Health. I've sat here, I've listened. I have heard very little talk about what we can do within the City of Toronto to reinvest and find these efficiencies and put it towards the programs we all think are important. There's been very little talk of that. You know, our councillors who are hosting town halls, are they going to advertise that we have all these outstanding audit recommendations? Are they going to advertise that last term our Auditor General brought us upwards of $30 million a year in potential savings on childcare per year? Is that going to be advertised? No, it probably won't. I think in this chamber, we need to be focused on working with the province. They are our biggest partner. We can't conduct the business we do at City Council for the residents of Toronto without their partnership. So I think there has to be a lot more of a diplomatic approach to this rather than a divisive approach. Even Councillor Pasternak read on June 8th, before anything was done, this council or members in this council were steadfast, ready to fight to the end, no matter what. No open door. So whether it's this or the next item or uploading the TTC or whatever, there's an agenda in here that is fight, fight, fight. And I think we need to be working together. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Colle, please. It's inappropriate for you to make those comments. Councillor Holiday. Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Yeah. Councillor Holiday.
If I may have the floor.
Sorry, I start your time over.
That's fine, but that's not me. And I treat people with respect in here.
Okay, Councillor Ford, please. Councillor Colle, please. Councillor Holiday.
Thank you for the floor, Madam Speaker. I have a very brief motion. It is just to amend the Board of Health's recommendations, which we are considering along with the Mayor's report. I've spoken to the Chair of the Board of Health. I believe that it brings most of the motions into full alignment between the two reports and reinforces something that I want to say in my moments here at the microphone. Nobody should be surprised. I'm one of the first councillors here to openly admit that I've questioned many programs in the city. And I question them fundamentally. There are things that we must deliver by rule or by some other policy, and that's no different in health. And I think there are some things that this council decides to deliver on its own. It sets its own service standards, and those are the will of council, and those are the programs that get delivered. But I opened up the public health budget agenda item because I think it was important to go back and read how all the numbers work. And I asked the Chief Medical Officer of Health some sort of high-level questions about, how does this all fit in? A couple things jump out at me. The provincial subsidies to Toronto Public Health is $183.5 million. It's no small figure. And $65 million of that is very, very material. And I contrast that to the net expenditures of Toronto Public Health. So all of the gross expenditures minus some of the money that they collect from other orders of governments, predominantly the provincial government, and their whole proposed operating budget was $64 million. So according to the staff's number, the cut is larger than the amount we even give to Toronto Public Health. So I'm quite willing to have a conversation about the different services that are in Toronto Public Health, but the conversation has to include understanding exactly what is ours to deliver by rule, and perhaps by rule of the province, and understanding what those cost to deliver. What are the ones that that council has set or created on its own, and are those within our control to make changes? Perhaps, but there's going to have to be a long process to do that through the budget committee. But where I have a big exception is to change the funding mid-year. I mean, this is baked in, $183 million worth of funding. And to rip $65 million out of that, I mean, we're getting shafted. I don't know how we're going to make that. I don't know anybody in this room knows how we're going to make up that gap as proposed. Which seems to me it's just not practical and couldn't happen that way. So I wanted to strengthen and maybe make the Board of Health's statements forward a little bit sharpened. I think everybody on this council, no matter how you feel about the size of government, the mandate of government, the various services that we do, I have a problem changing it mid-year. I have a real problem with changing the 2019 budget after we've already set it. So that message needs to go back very, very clearly. The facts need to go back to the residents of the city so they understand this is very, very complicated stuff. But at the end of the day, $65 million hole, I have no idea how we can fill that. And this is a very, very serious thing. Going forward, should we have a discussion with the province? I mean, they're paying 75% of the freight, and if they don't want to continue certain programs or they take exception to some of the decisions we've made, then table those. We'll talk about them. But at this point, we just have a haircut right now of $65 million, plus all the other services that are contained in the reports here, I should mention. We're in an untenable position, and I think the City Council should point out that that is just not an acceptable process to switch things right in the middle of the game, and we need to send that message that it's not workable the way that it is, and let's figure out a path forward together. Thank you.
Madam Speaker.
Thank you.
Madam Speaker.
Councillor Matlow?
I wanted to stand on a point of privilege. I just had I think the heckling that happened earlier to Councillor Ford was unfair. And it does harm to the reputation of this body. I have significant disagreements with some of the things that Councillor Ford said, but Councillor Ford is nothing but respectful, and he spoke, I thought, very articulately, even if I strongly disagree with him. And I just hope that, as angry and as upset as we are about the policy decisions of Queen's Park and Doug Ford, it doesn't seep towards how Councillor Ford is treated. And I wanted to say that as a colleague. And we are Team Toronto, and Councillor Ford is part of Team Toronto too, whether he knows it or not.
So I am.
Good.
Councillor. We have some questions for you.
Certainly.
3 minutes clarification of the motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm hoping they can put it back up because it hasn't been circulated yet. I just want to clarify. You want us now to highlight 2019. Am I to take it that by highlighting 2019, to amend the motion to do that, that you're giving tacit approval to changing the cost-sharing formula?
No, I think
into perpetuity?
Yeah, I think it strengthens the position of council to take strong objection to changes to the 2019 funding year. I recognize the reality of the situation, that I don't think the province is just going to forget about some of these proposals that they have. And it would be wise of this council to open up a process if there's going to be a change to figure out what that's going to be in out years. But in the 2019 year, we can't change the goalposts or reset the formula. It's too late.
So by highlighting 2019, are you saying the proposal to change the cost-sharing formula and have us pick up such things as infectious disease control using property tax dollars, as long as it's in a future year and we can prepare for it, that would be okay?
Well, that's not what I'm saying. I'm trying to strengthen the position, as I said, and I believe it's far more
So I guess the
consistent with.
clarification I need
Carroll,
is...
please allow the councillor to answer.
Okay.
I think it's far more consistent with the item number 1 of what the mayor has proposed.
So the item number 1 that the mayor has proposed actually does highlight 2019, but in the future, in the other clauses, what it does is make clear that the formula itself is the problem. So I'm wondering how your amendment strengthens our case on the whole proposal. How does it strengthen it by narrowing it to the 6 months remaining in this year? If you could clarify for me the word strengthen?
Yep, I think that the message needs to be sent very clearly, that it's not acceptable to change the 2019 funding arrangement. And the items out of the Board of Health were a little bit too generic.
So if someone were to strengthen our position on the future years and that using property tax dollars for fundamentally healthcare expenses, you would consider that strengthening as well in a friendly amendment?
Well, if you picked up on what I was talking about in the questions I was asking, I wasn't really clear from the mathematics brought forward by the Chief Medical Officer of Health of exactly what of those core services were under threat. We couldn't get those answers. So I have some exceptions with changing funding on things that are required services that are set by the province. That's a different discussion than some of the other services that are baked into the larger number. And
Well,
again, because the reports were
I
written
did
the way that
receive
they
those
were.
answers. 3 minutes, Madam Speaker. I did receive those answers. I'm crystal clear on the medical officer of health's answers.
Well,
Yeah, thank you.
no,
Those are my questions.
Councillor Holliday has the right to his opinion. Okay, well, Councillor Perks, clarification.
Thank you very much. So if I understand the change you're making in 1 sub A and B, it currently refers to all cuts to Toronto Public Health, but you want to narrow it to 2019.
Well, I think that's what we're dealing with here, and as I mentioned to Councillor Carroll, I have particular exception to the change in the 2019 year. And I think that that should be highlighted to the province.
So, and that's fine, I understand that. I'm just trying to understand what you're doing. Given that the mayor's motion number 1 does make reference to the total cuts in the 2019 budget, what is gained by removing the language that says we object to all public health cuts over the next 4 years and saying only 2019, given that we've already got 2019 in the mayor's motion? What is gained?
What is gained is that we need to go through a process and figure out exactly what it is that the province intends us to cut through
Okay.
their top-level cut. And we
All
don't
right,
know that because
I want to
we
follow
haven't
you a little further here.
executed all of the
I
steps.
want to follow you a little
in the
further
mayor's
here.
motion.
Your motion
Correct.
does not say, please sit down with us and have a discussion about what public health services should be delivered in the years 2020 and on. What your motion does do is remove council from having a position that the 2020 and 21 and 22 cuts are not being objected to.
Well, that has to be put through the other motions that the mayor has put forward under MM 7.13, where he talks about going through the budget committee process so that we can understand exactly what this means in the out years. And as I indicated in my speaking, I think there is things worth discussing in the Toronto Public Health budget, but it's just too early on. It's not something that we can manage mid-year. We need some opportunity to go through that process and maybe get some understanding or some more detail from the province, who's simply just taken an across-the-top cut on the amount of money they've sent us.
Okay. Final question. So you agree then that we need to have that conversation about how the cost sharing works in future years. So am I to take it by that you agree also with Premier Ford that the province of Ontario should be the only province in the entire country where the province doesn't have full responsibility of public health costs?
I think the process that we will go through will sort all of that out, and once we find out what those details are, we can make a better decision on where we are with our policy.
Thank you, Speaker. I understand why I can't vote for this now.
Thank you. Councillor Perruzza to speak.
Okay. Okay, thanks, bye.
Can you get off your phone? You're up to speak.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, I have a motion. And I'm not going to read the motion, but what it attempts to do, and I hope it does it, is basically ask that the City of Toronto secede financially from the province of Ontario. So that's economic secession. I'm not talking about a charter. I'm not talking about governance. I'm not talking about changing the Constitution of the Government of Canada or any of those kinds of things. What this says is this. The province basically is got us shackled. They've had us shackled basically since amalgamation. Well, before that, but certainly since amalgamation. Why? Because we have a range of cost-shared programs that they have been withdrawing their contributions to right from the get-go. And by doing that, what they really do is limit this council and this city's ability to manage its affairs and to grow the city as it sees fit. Now, with previous governments, what we really had was, you had the heads up. They would say, you know what, we're thinking of reorganizing our relationship with you. The Liberals did it to us. The Mike Harris Conservatives did it to us. Did it with us. But what is different now is that there are no more rules to the game. I think the mayor this morning was gentlemanly about it. If you're going to be serious in government, if you're going to conduct yourself seriously, right? The phrase he used was, I think, was businesslike. There's no more businesslike. There's no businesslike with these folks. It's a game. It's a game. What's at stake, what's to be won, that's not clear. I don't think they know. But the game is this. The game is to continually have us and have Torontonians in a state of confusion. It started right after the election with our election. Was followed up with transit. We no longer plan transit. Somebody else does. Where? I don't know. But what we do know is probably we don't get any transit. And now, messing with our budget. We set our budget. So we go back, special levy. The budget, so here's another interesting thing. The current government has no trouble collecting taxes from Torontonians. No trouble whatsoever. Councillor Ford talked about the provincial deficit. I think the Toronto share of provincial revenues is around 42%. We contribute way, way more than we ever get back. It's not because of Torontonians that you have a provincial deficit. We kick into the kitty, the provincial kitty. We don't get back anywhere near what we contribute. Nobody's been complaining about that. In fact, the mayor was a gentleman about that this morning as well. He said, well, you know what? We understand that we need to contribute to, regional development across the country and interregionally across the province. Torontonians have always accepted that fact. That fact. Yes. I thought I pronounced it correctly. That fact, F-A-C-T. But we don't get anywhere near that kind of money back. So what we really have is we have a bunch of new guys up at Queen's Park, right? And the old folks, the experienced folks, are being led by the new people. And quite frankly, the game's not clear yet. But what's happening is that they're messing with, and they continue to mess with, the economic engine of the province of Ontario. And I think they're wrong in doing that. Because a hiccup for us
Thank you, Councillor.
means a major headache for them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We do have some questions for you.
Sure.
Councillor Matlow.
Through you, Madam Speaker, I'd like to respectfully ask Councillor Perruzza to withdraw his motion for this reason. Two reasons. A, I wonder if the councillor really believes that the provincial government will, even for a moment, seriously entertain this request. And B, that there's been no consideration that I can see based on this motion for where the offsets would come from to take the provincial funding away that is currently funding provincial programming and services that we all rely on, no matter where those dollars are coming from throughout the province. Would you consider perhaps focusing on Mayor Tory's motion? Let's work as a team, let's focus on our end goal, and let's not go to these kind of places today.
Look, I'm going to support the mayor's motions. I have no problem supporting that. Here's what my motion asks, just to, maybe I didn't explain it well. It says this: the provincial government gives us $2.4 billion a year in supports as part of our operating budget. What this motion would do is that it would say, forget about it. Don't give us the money. Give us provincial income tax points equivalent to $2.4 billion, and we'll figure out what programs we spend it on, and we'll figure out what we carry on with and what we don't carry on with. They can keep their money. Just give us the tax points, and let us control those tax points. That's what this does. And what that would do is create essentially, it basically speaks to what you're trying to achieve in saying the City of Toronto needs to be a mature level of government, and we can't always be having to rely on what these folks are going to do for us and what they're going to give us and when they're going to give it to us and at what level they're going to give it to us, because that provides no level of certainty, and you can't govern yourself that way. So give us the tax points, we'll set those, equivalent to $2.4 billion, and then we'll figure out how to move forward, and we'll cobble together that $13 billion plus or minus dollar budget annually, and we'll figure out how to grow the City of Toronto. It's about economic independence. If they ever were to say, I agree with you, they like control, they want to shackle us. They don't want to give us economic independence. They want our enslavement to them. And that $2.4 billion, that's essentially what it does. Because we're going to go in a few short weeks and start our budget process all over again, and it could mean a 7% property tax increase to basically try to find this money. So he's got no problem taking the money. What he's saying is, you guys now go and get some more.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Layton to speak.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And first off, I'd just like to thank the Mayor for putting forward the motion and making it his key item, which I think highlights the importance that Council is putting on this change. You see, once again, the province has plunged our city, this Council, into chaos. We passed a budget 3 months ago. We're 5 months into 2019. Yet without any warning, without any consultation, without any thought to what the impact would actually be on the delivery of service to Torontonians, to residents of Ontario, the province has dropped a bombshell on several important policy and program areas. The province is putting at risk the health and the household budgets of all residents of Toronto. And what's worse is they've also decided to take out this vendetta against Ontario kids by jeopardizing their future and their development. These cuts are cruel. They focus on the most vulnerable people in our city. Cuts to public health, to programs that try to contain communicable diseases. Cuts to programs that feed children so they can learn well. Cuts to programs that prevent the spread and exposure to foodborne illnesses. Cuts to EMS as our citizens age and need more of these services. And you know, Council has already stood opposed to the public health, to the provincial cuts to public health. We did that at our last Council meeting. Now is time for us to bring this together with the latest rounds of cuts that we've just started to learn about and understand. Let me focus very specifically on childcare, and you can bring up the overhead if you would. The Premier is trying to make us believe that the cuts are administrative in nature. But he's not being honest. As we heard earlier today, only 17% of the cut is to the administrative budgets of our programs. An administrative budget that the province mandates based on the subsidy program. The province actually mandates us to have that administrative collection. But a full 50% of these cuts are cost-shared subsidies. Directly, those subsidies that 13,000 kids are waiting for so they can go to childcare, so parents can go back to work. We're going to have to cut 6,000 new subsidies going forward. There's a 13,000 wait list for subsidies. And 50% of the money, the $80 million that's being proposed to be cut, comes out of those programs. But that's not enough. 33% of the money being cut actually comes from serving programs for kids with special needs. Kids struggling with a variety of different issues that make it more expensive and more difficult for their childcare to deliver the appropriate level of service. Let's take it out on them. So we're targeting, at least the childcare cuts, are targeting low-income areas because the childcares that have more subsidy fees or rely on more fees are more vulnerable to these cuts. They may have to close. But we're targeting those areas and those individuals that rely on them most. And then on top of this, every full fee paying parent with a kid in childcare is going to get a 4.6% increase in their bill for every single full fee paying parent. We're targeting all of those families, and it's not fair. And with respect to the comments from Councillor Ford here and with respect to the cuts that are coming, we have reached out, the Mayor has reached out. These cuts came without consultation, without warning, halfway through the fiscal year.
Thank you. Okay, if we can put the ready to vote. Okay, so motion one by the Mayor. On favor? Yes, recorded vote.
Councillor Lai, please.
The motion carries 25-1.
Okay. Motion two. Do. Councillor Colle, you're not in the legislature. No, on favor? Recorded. Don't point your finger to me, Councillor Colle.
Councillor Thompson, please, and thank you.
He's doing the Italian gesture. My father used to do that all the
The
time.
motion carries 25-1.
You know what that means, right? Councillor Perruzza? His motion? Recorded vote?
Councillor McKelvey, please.
The motion does not carry. The vote is 8 to 18.
Okay. No, oh, that's the other item. Okay, that was the item. Oh, we voted on the amendments, right? Okay, so now the other item. HL 6.1, motion by Councillor Holliday, recorded vote.
The motion carries 16 to 10.
Item as amended, on favor, carried. Okay, we'll now go to the second key item. On page 3, EX 5.1, Ontario Place. Do we have any questions? No questions? The mayor's second key item, Ontario Place. Any questions? Okay, speakers. Is it? Okay, Mayor, did you want to speak? Okay, so, okay. Let's just wait for a few seconds because I think maybe I went a little too fast. I don't know if members of council know what item we're at. I said it 3 times, but everybody's looking kind of confused. Mayor Tory to speak.
Well, Madam Speaker, thank you. I won't belabor this. I have these motions here, and what they essentially do is to bring together the work that was done by the Toronto East York Community Council Subcommittee and work that's been done by city staff and bring it all into one. And I think the gist of it that I want to speak to is really in direct contrast to what we just did, but it's reaching out a hand that sort of says we have an opportunity here and let's not miss it. And the opportunity is to take the intention of the provincial government to have another look at Ontario Place and decide what to do with that, and quite properly so, and combine that with the hard work that's been done at Exhibition Place by the chair and the board, work done by the subcommittee of the Toronto East York Council, and by our own city staff, and have a more cooperative, consolidated look at the two premises taken together. And that doesn't mean that there have been failed attempts in the past to sort of bring them together under common ownership and all that kind of thing. They've been failed attempts for whatever series of reasons, doesn't matter. But in this case, what we're saying, and I'm really hopeful that the province will, in a genuine way, adopt a different approach than what has been adopted on the budget. That was, as we've discussed all day so far, unilateral. It was retroactive. It was done without consultation. Here is an opportunity, I think, for us to sit together, and it will only work if it's done in a genuine way. It will only work, frankly, legally if it's done in a genuine way. I respect and understand the fact that even though, for example, we actually own a piece of the Ontario Place site, the City of Toronto does, and I understand the fact that can be legislated and regulated like a lot of things by Queen's Park. But we can have one of two ways of doing this. One is the productive way that could produce something truly excellent at Exhibition Place and Ontario Place for the people of Toronto and the people of Ontario. And the other way is kind of like the way the budget has gone, which is a way that I will say, from my standpoint, could well have them, if they want to do it this way, passing a regulation or considering a piece of legislation about every 2 weeks, and consuming half the time of the Ontario legislature to try and get something done in a way that is non-consultative and non-cooperative. And to me, it's a no-brainer that you would go with the approach that says that we're going to be able to faster and better produce something truly excellent across both sites that makes sense because you've been able to sort of use the resources of the two sites for the people of Toronto and the people of Ontario if you do it in genuine collaboration and cooperation. Genuine collaboration and cooperation. I said this morning in speaking to the media, genuine collaboration and cooperation does not mean collaboration in name only. It does not mean you send plans down to the City Hall and say, this is how we've decided to deal with your waterfront or with your exhibition place. And when I say your waterfront, I acknowledge the fact that Ontario Place is largely, not exclusively, owned by the province and has been developed over the years as a provincial attraction. And I think over many of those years, a good job was done at that. But at the same time, it is still our waterfront, where the water meets the land, is part of Toronto's waterfront, and we have demonstrated over the years, we and the other two governments, that we can work together to develop and to evolve that waterfront for the benefit of the people of Ontario, Canada, and Toronto. And I think we have another opportunity to do that again now with the full involvement of Exhibition Place, the involvement of the Ontario Place governance as it now is, which is more really subsumed inside the Government of Ontario, and the involvement of the people and the government of the City of Toronto. So, and by the way, if the federal government want to be part of this too, in terms of any interest they have in improving that section of town, and then of course we'd be interested. I think there's just nothing but opportunity here, but I think it's going to require us to have made the first move. And I will say, as I said this morning, I was the person that reached out to the Premier privately in August and said to him, as we stood at Exhibition Place at the opening ceremonies for the CNE, we really should be working on this together. We should be working on this together, even though at the time all the talk was about Ontario Place. And I think now we have an opportunity to continue with that, but it has to be done in a spirit of genuine collaboration. And it's really quite different. And I guess maybe what the budget has shown us is the place you can end up in if you don't operate that way, which is a place we're still trying to get out of by having a sit-down and a collaboration and a cooperation with them. But I think this offers us the opportunity from virtually the beginning to cooperate and to collaborate together to produce something we can all be proud of, and that the people will be proud of, and they'll be proud of it both because of the result, but I think they'll be proud of the way we did it if we can work together. So I commend these motions to you. I commend this process initiative to you that reaches out to the province and asks them to work with us, and I just look forward to them hopefully saying yes to that process, participating in it in a genuine way, and producing a fantastic result for the people of Ontario and the people of Toronto. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Councillor Cressy to speak.
Well, thank you, Speaker, and I will be supporting the Mayor's motion that brings together 4 items. The Subcommittee on Ontario Place recommendations, a Cultural Heritage Landscape Assessment, a Preservation Board item, as well as an item from the Exhibition Place Board. And on that note, I'd like to thank staff across departments, from Heritage to Planning to the Waterfront Secretariat, the members of the Ontario Place Subcommittee, Councillors Layton, Perks, Fletcher and myself, and of course, Chair of Exhibition Place, Mark Grimes, who brought a letter forward on this to Exhibition Place. Ontario Place is 155 acres of public land in the heart of our city, on the front of our waterfront. And when it was established in 1971, it was established as an urban park for all Ontarians. And while there may still be, last year, 1.5 million visitors to Ontario Place. If you can imagine it, 1.5 million people went to Ontario Place last year. That's more than the CN Tower. On the basis of Trillium Park and the Cinespheres, nobody would tell you that it's not set or time for an uplift and a revitalization. We know it is. But you only get one chance to revitalize Ontario Place. You only get one. And thus it's critical that you get it right. Now the province owns most of the land on Ontario Place. But as the mayor said, they don't own all the land. In fact, the city owns part of it. And more than being an owner of part of the land as the city, we have a direct vested interest related to the infrastructure and servicing requirements, the transit requirements, the integration with Exhibition Place that has been talked about for decades. There has been motion after motion at the city about looking at the two, Exhibition Place and Ontario Place, as a precinct. And so the simple fact is the city can't go it alone, but nor can the province. In fact, this will only work as a revitalization exercise if it's done together. Now, the province announced its intention to reimagine Ontario Place. And what we've done here is come in and say, okay, if you want to reimagine Ontario Place, it has to be led and driven by clear principles based on public policy and the public interest. And so we've been proactive at the city, and that's what's in front of us here today, in articulating a series of principles that we're all being asked to vote on, related to public access, connection to the waterfront, heritage preservation, the expansion of parkland, bringing arts and culture in with year-round animation. All of that is required. And I should tell you that when it comes to Ontario Place, it's not just people who grew up going to see bands there in the 70s and 80s who are paying attention. I've been blown away at the thousands of Torontonians and Ontarians who have responded on this, from the Ontario Place for All organizing group, just everyday residents who've come out to town halls. And so what we know Ontario Place and Exhibition Place should be, which is somewhere that exists for everyone. And I think many of us also know what it shouldn't be, which is a mega mall or a casino. And so I'll simply close by saying that the future of Ontario Place should belong to all Ontarians. Its future should be decided in public, with public input, and with the City of Toronto. We cannot allow the future of Ontario Place or Exhibition Place to be decided in back rooms. Rather, it's incumbent on us to seek that revitalization that I think Torontonians and Ontarians deserve. And that's why I think we're being proactive in putting forward our principles that should guide our participation in it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Layton to speak.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to add two things in particular. One, that we have an opportunity here to do one of two things. One is to create something that we can be proud of and that we can take our kids to and our grandkids to for generations. Or we have we make the mistake that is to squander this amazing public resource. The second point I want to make is around wasting time. Let's not continue to waste time, go back to zero on a project like Ontario Place and Exhibition Place. You see, when I first took office in 2010, I think I was like many Torontonians and didn't know exactly what was going on the Exhibition Place ground. Knew Ontario Place very well, knew of the fair, knew of some events, but I too questioned the benefit of vast parking lots and some of these underused heritage buildings. But the more I got to appreciate and learn about the site, the more I actually got to explore some of the secrets that are in Exhibition Place, with the Rose Garden, the Garden of the Greek Gods, the public art that's on the site, the beauty of some of the heritage buildings and the history of things like the Royal, the CNE, some of the other events that have actually given shape to the grounds. The more I appreciated that there are actually a lot of players involved. And once more, as the neighborhood grew up around it, more and more people were laying claim, had a stake in the debate. And I think that having now learned what I have about Exhibition Place and spent time on the board, spent time as the local representative, I realized that we do truly need to have a strong vision for the site. It needs to not only serve our purpose as a city, which means some large-scale events, but it also needs to serve the local purpose. And in a neighborhood, surrounded by the neighborhoods of Fort York, Parkdale, South Etobicoke, Liberty Village, we are running out of waterfront land to be used by those individuals that now live there. And we need to put a focus on ensuring that that public resource is kept and remains as a public resource. There will, of course, be calls for some private interests on the site, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't open that up. In a situation where we're planning both Ontario Place and Exhibition Place, we should welcome some activation. But we've got to be very careful that all of those activations are serving a wider purpose. Because if you think of the debate that we got into around some of the more recent land exchanges around Exhibition Place, you start to question whether or not those sets of values and goals were well established. Because there was clearly a strategic plan that said, open this space up to the surrounding community for activation, but at the same time we built buildings that were very inward facing. Now, no one probably understands the Ontario Place site more than our mayor. Mayor Tory was involved in what I would describe as a good process, but at its core it was proposed under a very troubling motive, and that was that the government shouldn't put any money in. That was how the government of the day tied Mayor Tory's hands. And so we couldn't come up with a grand vision for the site. We couldn't go out and ask the public, well, if you were really wanted to build something you could be proud of, what would it look like? Because he was told, you got to do all those things, but you can't spend any money. So we were stuck in a bad place. All of us know you don't get something for nothing. Although many of us think we can build transit plans based on no financing, that is, now we all know that's in fact not the case. So I would urge the province to come to the table and the city to, now that we've extended the hand, to remain there to try to get this right. We have tried this many times before, including the last term of council, but I think it's worthy giving another try.
Thank you. That's it for the speakers. Can we put the motions on the screen? Okay, motion 1A. All in favor? Carried.
On a point of order, I was a bit sort of discombobulated when I got up to speak because it happened so quickly. I'm sure there was going to be questions and other speakers. And one thing I didn't spend a minute on, I just want to, because I think it's worthwhile. I talked a lot about cooperation between the Ontario government and the City of Toronto, which I hope is going to be something that will, this will only work if that happens. But I didn't mention the cooperation that's taken place inside the city. And I mean even inside this council, and that includes Councillor Grimes, it includes Councillor Cressy and the members of his subcommittee, it includes the city staff, and I think it was a good example in here as well. The reason that it all went so fast is because there was so much time spent talking back and forth between all the different people. We brought 4 items together into one and dealt with it in 25 minutes, and some people may say we didn't take enough care. It's because there's been a lot of care and time taken before we got here, and it's a model. And I just want to thank those involved, Councillor Grimes, Councillor Cressy, the members of his subcommittee, the staff, because I think we've got a blueprint here for something that could be exciting if we cooperate well with the other government. But I didn't spend enough time because I was sort of I hadn't thought I was going to be on my feet so soon. So I want to thank them very much. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Motion 1B. All in favor? Recorded.
Councillor McKelvey, please.
Councillor Wong-Tam, please.
The motion carries unanimously, 25 in favor.
Motion 1C. Did we need a recorded vote on this one? Yes? Recorded vote.
The motion carries unanimously, 25 in favor.
Item as amended, all in favor? Carried. So, on page 7T, 5.27. It's on the screen. All in favor? Recorded vote. Okay.
Councillor Filion, please.
The motion carries unanimously, 25 in favor.
On page 7T, 5.26. All in favor? Carried. Okay, so that's it on that item. Okay, on page 3, EX 5.7, number of unwanted firearms in Toronto. Do we have questions to staff? Councillor Fletcher.
I'm not sure if this is appropriate, but unwanted firearms, and I believe that's the program that we're using to address that, the buyback. But I'm very interested in what it would take to have any legislation that would allow the City of Toronto to discreetly deal with handguns within our own boundaries legally. In other words, rather than a countrywide ban, that we would have an ability to limit or ban handguns within our city limits.
Through the Speaker, there is a report coming forward to Council, I believe in the July cycle, that will address all of the potential opportunities for legislative or regulatory measures to address guns.
And it will also cover very clearly that pathway.
I will certainly raise that with the staff drafting that report, that there has been an interest in that. It will be looking at all avenues available to the municipality.
Well, that one is not available at the moment. I'm wondering if City Legal would like to comment on if there's any pathway that our city solicitor actually knows, or how high that hurdle is.
Through you, Madam Speaker, last August, Council asked for reports on a number of different issues pertaining to gun control within the City of Toronto, and we are looking at those. And there will be a report coming to the June cycle, actually, of Executive Committee, looking at all those issues.
Month. And you're specifically looking at, I guess I'm asking on that, it's one thing to report and say, well, we can't do it, and it's another thing to report and say, here's how that would have to happen. So I'm quite interested in which one you're pursuing.
We can look at asks that Council could make for new legislation and comment on that in the report. Certain aspects of gun control are squarely within the federal government's jurisdiction, and others are squarely within the provincial government's jurisdiction.
And so far, none are in the city's jurisdiction.
There's very little room for the
little room.
municipality, yes.
Okay. Thank you so much. You're up.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Just a few questions with respect to the firearms that have been turned in as part of the buyback program. Can someone explain to me what types are there and who's actually turning them in? Are there firearms being stored in people's basements, been around for 30 years, and they're being brought in, or this is are firearms being brought in by those who are using them, creating the carnage and the challenges that we're actually having in the city?
Through the Speaker, with respect to the types of firearms, there's basically two different categories, long guns and handguns. The split roughly is 2/3 long guns, 1/3 handguns. Certainly there is a desire to particularly collect handguns. With respect to who is turning them in, that analysis hasn't been completed. The program concludes this Friday. We can certainly talk with Toronto Police Service to get as much of that information once the program is complete as we can.
So, through you, Speaker, the issues that we're having in the city and perhaps elsewhere outside the city, is it an issue with respect to long guns, or is it an issue with respect to firearms, handguns in general?
There are issues with respect to all guns. Long guns can be modified.
Yeah, but have they been? Is that one of the problems we're having in the city?
There is an issue with long guns being used in that way in the city, but certainly handguns are a focus.
So these handguns that, and I realize you just indicated that, I guess more analysis has got to be done, but the ones that have been turned in, can someone help me to understand the process and procedure that is required for turning them in? Is it that they're brought to a station and then they are dealt with, or we don't take them to a station, the police will go to your home and or maybe meet you off-site somewhere? Can someone explain how that particular process works?
With this particular initiative, the approach is to encourage individuals with firearms that they wish to dispose of to contact Toronto Police Service. On the non-emergency line, Toronto Police Service then arranges to come and collect the firearm.
Right. And when those firearms, or those that have been collected, whether or not they be long guns and or handguns, have there been any testing done on these firearms to determine whether or not there's a connectivity at all, with respect to these firearms being utilized in gun crime and other incidents in the city?
There is. The firearms are so tested, and that's done before any remuneration is paid for the firearm.
So then this will be, so there's no need for analysis with respect, we have that information, because as you've just indicated, we have that information.
We will have that analysis.
So then, are we getting to the root cause of the problem, or are we just simply saying that we want to be able to gather and remove some of these before it gets into the hands of those who would be able to utilize them to create the problems that we're actually trying to arrest in the city?
This initiative is not targeted at root causes. It is targeted at removing, and any gun that is removed from the public is a step in the right direction. We have many, many other interventions where we're looking to attack the root causes.
So then we ought not to get too excited with respect to this process. I mean, I'm all for removing guns, period. But I think that some of the challenges that we see in the city and the expectation of the public, should we then perhaps temper that a bit with respect to that process in terms of their appreciation or understanding? And I ask this question because those are some of the questions that are asked by members of the public of me in terms of how this particular program will work. I mean, I'm not criticizing the program, but I just want to make sure that we don't establish a false narrative in the assumption that somehow that the removal of these, as you say, 2/3 long guns and 1/3 handguns that are not being used for criminal activities, that creates this false narrative that somehow that we're arresting or dealing with the problem.
Through the Speaker, this is not the solution to gun violence. It is certainly an important step and a worthwhile investment to remove as many guns from the general public as possible.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, my Deputy Speaker.
Thank you. Councillor Karagianis, you had some questions first?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, through you to staff. How successful has the program been so far?
Through the Speaker, we are approaching 1,500 firearms being collected through the program. We have run gun amnesties and gun buybacks in the past, and that program performance is better than most, but it's not as high as some we've run in the past.
So 1,500. 1,500 guns. How many of those are long guns and how many are handguns?
Roughly a 2/3, 1/3 split
So that would be
in favor of the long guns.
1,000 long guns and 500 handguns.
Approximately, yes, and we have another 3 days to go in the program. The program runs until Friday.
Would you be extending the program? Would that be a positive step forward?
That's not contemplated at this time, and that we would take the lead from our colleagues in Toronto Police Service.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Karagianis. Councillor Colle, you had some questions?
Yes, just staff. In terms of your discussions with the police and being involved in this amnesty program, I wonder if you could help answer a question. Anecdotally, what I hear on the street is that there's more guns than ever before, and they're easier to get, easier to rent, and also that younger people seem to be carrying more guns than they have before. That's, again, anecdotally. What are the police saying about the proliferation or the amount of guns on the street as relates to this amnesty program?
Through the Speaker, all of the issues you've identified are of concern, both to our colleagues in Toronto Police Service and to our colleagues in the city who work with communities dealing with gun violence. I would be happy to provide a report after the program is concluded. We can certainly get some analysis and comment from Toronto Police Service at the conclusion of the program.
Yes, and the second question I have is in terms of the source of these unlawful handguns, usually, you hear a lot of different sort of explanations. They say that they're being smuggled across the border, they're being stolen out of homes. They're being transported across Canada. Do we have any information from the police or in your work about where they're all coming from?
There is data with respect to the origin of certainly crime-related guns, and in the report that will be coming forward in June, we would be able to provide some of that data. I don't have it in front of me today, but we're happy to get you that data.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Colle. Those are the ends of questions. Councillor Karygiannis, you held the item down.
Mr. Speaker, I do have a motion that I'd like to put it up, please. Basically, what I'm looking for is that we extend this to June 17th by one more month, and we ask the Toronto Police Services Board in order to look at it. I think it's a good initiative. We heard that there were 1,500 guns that have been collected, 500 handguns, 1,000 long guns. I think that goes a long ways in protecting our citizens. 500 handguns that especially that are out of circulation, that limits the amount of handguns that are limited to criminals in order to commit acts, and certainly citizens of Toronto that don't want those handguns certainly give them back. So I would recommend that we extend this by asking the Police Services Board to extend it by 1 month, if not more, in their wisdom, and for us to continue in that process in order to make sure that handguns come off the street.
Those are your comments? Thank you. Mr. Mayor, your name's not there, but I understand you wanted to speak on the item? Yes, I have no one else.
So there's no one else. Well, Madam Speaker, first of all, I'd just like to speak for a moment to the program itself, and what we're here to do is, of course, to fund the program as it has been proposed, which with the time limit of later this week. And I think it has been successful. And again, I know there's been a great deal of debate about this. I've heard it as I've traveled around the city on talk radio. You hear it from a very few people, although I think most average citizens actually think that this is one of a number of things that we can do to try and take guns off the street or out of the community. And the fact is that a lot of these guns are guns that were, in fact, lying around the houses of law-abiding citizens and so on, and they were the ones that called the police. In fact, I'm sure most of them, all of them, may have been law-abiding citizens, but it gets those guns out of the community. And a lot of those, if they weren't used in sort of ending up being stolen and used in criminal offenses that way, sometimes if they're lying around a house or a property, they can end up being used in acts of domestic violence, and that's a very common thing that tragically happens in our community. So to me, the notion of getting these, I think it's now up to 1,500 guns before the program's over, getting them out of the community and into the hands of the police for destruction is nothing but a good thing. And if it means one gun doesn't fall into the hands of a criminal or someone who's going to use it to commit a criminal act, including acts of domestic violence, then to me that is a program well worth doing. I will say that the dates for the program were quite deliberately selected by the police service, and you have to rely on their expertise on these matters as to sort of the, trying to think of the right word, the optimum period of time during which to have the public participate in this. As you might expect, the numbers of the guns that were turned in had an initial burst that was the majority of the 1,500. It has slowed down during that period of time. And I think I can't really represent their views here today because I didn't frankly expect there'd be a motion to extend the program, which carries with it, by the way, financial consequences as well, which we're not here approving today. We're here only to approve the budget for the project as it was contemplated to the 17th of May. But I would think that they might be here to say that we'd be better off to do another buyback another time rather than extend this one in terms of optimizing again the attention and the money of the police service to this project. So I will, not because I don't think it's a good idea to carry on with this activity, I will vote against Councillor Karygiannis' motion and rather apply my own efforts to trying to convince the police service that we should do another gun buyback sometime in the future when we get another fresh start, another burst of publicity, and another round of guns that will come off the street, because I believe that extending it another month in this instance will have minimal returns. And that is based in part on some discussions I've had with the police service at the instigation or at the beginning of this, the initiation of this particular buyback. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Tory. So, seeing no other speakers, councillors, we have before us first a motion, a request from Councillor Karagianis. I think we can put it on the screen to request the police board to extend the program. Seeing no request for a recorded vote, all in favor? Oh, did I hear recorded? Recorded vote, all in favor?
So what's the bill?
It's to extend the program to the...
No?
I said I'm voting against it because the police service specifically said to me, well, you were the chief.
Your mic is on.
I said it. I already said it.
So we'll vote no.
Councillor Fletcher, when you're seated, thank you.
The motion does not carry. The vote is 8 to 15.
Okay, councillors, on the main item, all in favor? Not hearing a request for recorded. All in favor? Oh, a recorded vote has been requested.
Councillor Lai, thank you. Councillor Fletcher.
The item carries unanimously, 23 in favor.
Thank you. Councillors, that brings us to page 3, Audit 2.1. Moving forward together, opportunities to address broader city priorities in Toronto Community Housing Corporation revitalizations. Councillor Fletcher, you held it. I understand you have a quick release unless there are questions of staff first. Seeing no questions of staff? Yep.
Oh, no,
We were just going to dispense with this item so that...
Councillor Fletcher?
Spend a long time, and I would, motion is to City Council request Executive Director, Housing Secretariat in consultation with CreateTO to report to the July 3rd, 2019 meeting of the Planning Housing Committee on any options for city building objectives that may be included on revitalizations that have yet to obtain planning approvals, and that's directly from the Auditor General's recommendation number 1. So we'll just see what's possible before we close everything off. And with that, I would just move that and the report.
Okay, on the amendment by Councillor Fletcher, on favor, carried. Item as amended, on favor, carried. Our next item is on page 3, Audit 2.4, Review of Urban Forestry. Councillor Filion held the item down. Do we have questions to staff? Councillor Filion. Councillor Filion. You held the item down. Do we have questions to staff?
If anyone else does.
Does anybody have any questions to staff? Please put your name.
Yeah, sure.
Councillor Carroll, questions?
It's one simple question, Madam Speaker. And I apologize because this may have been asked in audit. I wasn't able to attend that meeting. The central issue here is requiring an installation of GPS amongst our contracted services, and then it appears we weren't monitoring it. What I'm wondering is if in the course of the audit, anyone wound the clock all the way back to when it was first proposed that we do that. When it was first proposed to us, were we offered a project that would have included the human resources positions to properly monitor this? Is this a matter of bringing forward a proposal and then trimming it back in implementation, is what I'm getting at?
So through the Speaker, there's two separate items. The first being the installation of GPS in our contractor vehicles, which was first required in 2017 as part of the contract.
Right.
Second issue that the auditor recommended, which we've accepted, is installing GPS in all of the city contracted vehicles.
Yes.
And work is already underway to make that happen in the next several months.
Right.
So on the contractor vehicles, there are guidelines that we have in place around managing the workload of those contractors and double checking them. The GPS, which we don't have real-time access to, is used as that foolproof with the contractor if we're questioning their daily logs. So moving forward, and part of the auditor's recommendations, we will be increasing our requirements around those types of checkbacks, specifically using the GPS.
Moving forward.
That's correct.
But what I'm asking is when we had this grand idea so that we could have more management and be more accountable in terms of managing contracted services, when we proposed what we now do as of 2017, did we bring forward a more robust form of monitoring and then trim it back to get to yes?
So through the Speaker, we did not. Once the GPS requirements for the contractors were brought into the contractual obligations, we continued to use the same resources to monitor the contractor work.
So the question is this. Does the learning extend to not only improving this program, but have we now learned if we're going to use more, if we're going to add a more technological base to how we hold contracted services accountable, are we learning from this? That when we first devised that, when we first proposed that and go through the procurement, go through the staffing model, get council to adopt it, that built into it, going forward from the get-go, from implementation, built into it will be the type of management that the Auditor General is telling us we should have done here right from the get-go.
Through the Speaker, that's correct. And I should also mention that the implementation of our own work order management system, which is happening throughout the city, will be implemented in approximately 1 year, and all forestry is the first rollout of that program, where the type of GPS monitoring you're speaking about will be part of that more automated approach. So it will take the manual work away from staff with real-time monitoring of those contracts available.
But a human will do the monitoring so that we're not spending on the tech for nothing.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Holliday, questions?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think my first question is to Mr. Patchlock. I just wondered if I could understand a little bit better what the codified requirements are of managers in general. And I just mean managers, the whole management structure and people to look after and oversee work is regarding contract management. We've got a lot of contracts, and this is just one example of them in this particular audit.
Through the Speaker, the purchasing bylaw does provide for provisions that set out that division heads and the project leads that they assign to manage contracts are responsible for contract management. And I'm sure in various job descriptions, contract management is included as job descriptions for various types of staff.
So I'll make the observation, and I wonder if you could qualify or confirm that, but at General Government and Licensing Committee, we do often get reports to which we question you on contracts and changes to contracts. And of course at Audit Committee, where there's a few of them on this particular agenda, and we see them often on contracts. Would it be fair to say that the purchasing bylaw and perhaps other bylaws are important and applicable to the life of these contracts?
Through the Speaker, yes, I would say that it is. It's important that if we're going to enter into contractual arrangements with these vendors, that we're managing them to the contract so that we can ensure we're getting best value.
When you embark on a procurement project with any division or any department, what does your area do to discuss this concept of the requirement for contract management going forward? Or maybe even a broader question, is it considered part of the procurement life cycle of a project to manage it once it's past the selection of a vendor stage?
Through the speaker, it's certainly part of the procurement life cycle. As part of the process, we'll remind divisions of their responsibility to manage the contracts, look for over expenditures, get the proper approvals in advance. We don't have beyond that, we don't have, purchasing does not have a centralized capacity to assist divisions in doing that, but we are trying to build in some tools ourselves, and Janie has mentioned tools that they're trying to build in to assist their ability to manage contracts better.
To the city manager, Madam Speaker. As we work through this file at Audit Committee, this particular audit, we learned a lot about how it works with forestry and how the contracts are overseen, how the work is divided. But perhaps there still are questions unanswered or concerns out there. And I mean, you open any newspaper, you can see that. I wondered, through you, Madam Speaker, to you, the city manager, is this something that the management team is looking at? And not just about this file, but contracts in general, and maybe about this file. Are you taking a closer look at the findings of the auditor, and what are you doing as the head representative of the city's management team to deal with this concept of watching these things unfold?
So through the speaker, you'll recall, Councillor, when we were presenting the budget back a few months ago, I talked about the need for the Toronto Public Service to earn council and this community's trust and confidence. So when you get a report like the one that we have here from the auditor, it starts to call into question whether or not we've earned the trust and confidence when you have these kinds of problems surface. So that to say that Julie and I have in fact been talking about this particular matter that's been brought to everyone's attention. There is a deeper dive being done right now to look at what rules were followed, what rules may not have been followed as carefully as they should have been. We're looking at it from both a, certainly a Toronto Public Service standpoint, but also from the contractor responsibilities as well. And so with any deep dive, I expect at the end there'll be findings, and those findings will result in measured reactions to those findings. So I'm not going to predict what it is, obviously, that we're going to do at this point in time, but I go back to the importance of earning trust and confidence of this council and this community, and that's what I'm committed to doing. And in terms of the broader nature of contracts and our responsibility to ensure that payments don't occur until the work has been proven, that's a universal requirement, I think, of all things that we purchase from the private sector. And again, we have to be vigilant on that. I don't expect purchasing to oversee every transaction in that matter, as pointed out, but certainly the program offices that are contracting work do have that responsibility.
Thank you. Councillor Fletcher.
I just have a question about management oversight on this file. And would it be the same management oversight on the contractors, the same managers overseeing the contractors as are overseeing the city crews that are going out?
So through the speaker, the requirements on contract management oversight are actually more than the oversight on the same city crews. So as an example, there's a requirement for our foremen for city crews to visit one crew per week.
Sorry?
And there's a requirement for our foremen, for people to visit one city crew per week. As a site visit, the requirement is 2 contractor crews per week for the contractor crews. So the oversight requirements are actually higher than with city crews.
So how many forepersons are there overseeing city crews, and how many are there overseeing the contracted out?
There's a total of 18 foremen, four people.
18 people, and the number that are dedicated solely to contract managed work?
So through the Speaker, they may not be completely dedicated to contract management. They would have a group of crews. Some would be contract crews, some would be city crews.
And then how did they report out, and who did they report to?
So the 4 people will report to supervisors, who report to managers, who then report into the director of the division, who ultimately reports to myself.
And that little, maybe I'll ask the auditor, where'd the Auditor General go?
Right there behind you.
Where? Oh, there she is there. So the little GPS maps that you had for the crews, did you have the same maps for the 4 people, the 4 persons, showing where they had gone and their oversight?
We
Since
did.
we're learning that there's two visits a week to
We
cruise?
didn't follow the same map because the city vehicles do not have GPS in them, but we did monitor when they did their inspections. We did find they did their inspections in the morning and not so much in the afternoon, and that's where we found most of the issues was in the afternoon.
And thank you. And you also found that some contractors, it looks as if they were doing private trees. Is that your assumption, that at times that there was private tree work being undertaken by certain contractors?
There was work done in a cemetery. They weren't city trees. And essentially, there was work that we couldn't tie to city trees.
So where the stop was?
Correct.
I mean, it's one thing to stop at a coffee shop, you know that's for the coffee, but on a street address, a residential street address that isn't on a list, then you might assume that that is not a city tree, that's a private tree.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much for your report.
Thank you. Councillor Pasternak.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Through you to the Auditor General. I notice in recommendation 5, you make reference to moving or towing parked vehicles for tree trimming. How often are we towing vehicles within the 3-hour parking limit for the trimming of a tree?
How often are we, sorry, what was the question? How often are we towing?
I mean, are these legally parked vehicles, or? And how quickly can you arrange for a tow truck to tow a car for tree trimming?
So they, Madam Speaker, they tow them away from the area, not necessarily completely tow them out of the entire district. They just move them so they can access a tree, but we found on average between a half an hour and 3.5 hours was dedicated to that time where the trees couldn't be accessed.
So the subcontractor or city crew would call a towing company and have the car moved. Is that how this system works?
That's correct.
Okay. I guess recommendation number 2 with the GPS in city vehicles. Have any consultations taken place with our collective bargaining units on whether we can ever get that done, or would they in fact not agree?
Through the Speaker, we are following through, as noted in our response. We support all of the Auditor General's recommendations in this report. We are looking at the implementation right now of GPS for all forestry crews as a beginning, and we will be consulting with our bargaining units, but that consultation has not taken place yet.
When it comes to, I guess, recovering funds that have been paid for non-work, is there any hope to recover those funds? Are we holding back any invoices, or are we canceling contracts? What's our action?
So through the Speaker, all of the above. Our first recourse is to be meeting with our vendors around the results of the Auditor General's report, which we've already begun those meetings. We are reviewing all of the logs that the Auditor General brought up with them that were problematic, to have them look at their own logs to make some comparisons. And certainly our intent would be to recover any overpayment that the city has already done through these invoices.
So on our contracts, are we paying on a per tree basis, or are they sort of monthly?
So through the Speaker, for these vendors, the contracts are hourly and weekly around the invoicing oversight.
And do the same companies do the planting as well? The
Sorry,
trimming
pardon
and
me?
the plant? Are the companies that we hire for planting on the public right-of-way the same companies we hire for trimming?
Through the Speaker, these vendors are doing a variety of forestry operations, including tree planting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that's it for the questions. Speakers. Councillor Filion?
Yes, thank you. So this is obviously, it would appear that we have companies that are contracted to the city who weren't doing the job they were supposed to do, and there were people who worked for the city who were supposed to be supervising them who weren't doing the job they were supposed to do. And that's all disturbing and embarrassing, and that's all been in the newspapers, and I think most people know that story. There's a flip side to this, however, which I think addresses the need for trust and confidence that our public would have in what we do here, and that is the fact that we found this. And not only did we find it, but we were willing to find it in a very public and potentially embarrassing way, because we have an Auditor General who we not only send out to do this work and to report back very publicly, but recently we even said do more of it, and we increased her budget in a time when we were flatlining a lot of other budgets. We said, here's some more funding, go out and do more of this. So I think both the public and the provincial government can feel both confident and, in the case of the latter, perhaps envious, that we do have a system in place that finds the inefficiencies and has a effective way of dealing with them. So I just wanted to add that to the mix. Thank you.
Are there any further speakers on the item? Okay, so on the item, okay, Councillor Fletcher to speak.
Yes, I simply want to note that in some parts of the city, when there's going to be tree trimming of our trees that are in our right-of-way, the night before, there are signs, and I've seen this in my ward, that get put out advising everyone that tree trimming will be taking place. It does not happen across the entire city. It doesn't happen in every ward. I don't know what triggers that or how you get that, but I think that should be the standard practice, because hearing that crews are waiting for a tow truck, that just seems like it's a tremendous waste of time and money. Perhaps there's other trees that are close by one could trim or water, but there needs to be a much stronger regimen to let the public know that there will be that road will not be available between certain hours at certain times, because we will be trimming trees. So if we were to look at the amount of money that we've lost that way, it's probably a very large amount of money. And I do think, I have seen this work, and I don't know if it's a pilot program. It's not a pilot program. It's just not used everywhere. And where there is permit parking, people need some expectation that their permit, bless you, that they're not going to be able to use their permit at that certain time. So their permit parking rights will be taken over by greater city rights, which is tree trimming. So I'm looking at the general manager, and she's nodding her head that this is a practice that, along with all of the other recommendations the Auditor General has made, we should do that, because I don't think that was in as strict of a recommendation as it could have been. Thank you.
Thank you. On the item, recorded vote.
Councillor Pasternak, please.
Councillor Fletcher, please.
The item is adopted unanimously, 22 in favor.
Our next item is on page 4.
I'm sorry, we just forgot to change the chair. The vote on that item is unanimously 23 in favor.
Thank you. On the next item is on page 4, HL 6.3, service agreements awarded and executed by the medical officer of health. Councillor Holliday, you held the item down. Do we have questions? Does anybody have any questions?
No, Madam Speaker, I was able to get them offline.
Okay, do we have any speakers? Okay, on the item, HL 6.3, all in favor? Carried. Next item on page 4, GL 4.7, redevelopment of St. Lawrence Market North. Deputy Mayor Min Wong, you held the item down. Do we have questions of staff? Okay. Okay, questions.
Yeah, what was the original contract price for this project?
Hold on, I'll
Thank you.
reset your timer.
Through the Speaker, the original contract price was $81 million.
So the report in 2010 said $75 million. The report in 2010 report said it was $75 million.
Oh, so that's the project value of the project. Back in, you're correct, in 2009, the project was a Class D budget, and based on the concept design at that time, the budget was $79 million.
And that was funded over various years, correct?
That's correct. Throughout the iterative process of design, the budget was revisited again in 2013 when they were at schematic design. At that point, they realized, the staff realized that the project budget was based on 2009 dollars, and the budget had to be increased at that point in time.
When we budget these things, don't we adjust for inflation?
Typically, yes, we do.
Did we miss that in this one?
I wasn't here at that time, so typically we would budget for escalations. But again, at that time I wasn't here, so I can't address that question.
Sorry, it may be.
Okay, can anybody answer that question? Okay.
Through the Speaker, I'll just give you a bit of the history, Deputy Mayor. So in 2013, they had been doing value engineering of the project because the actual amount was over 100 million, so we brought it down to 91, and we came to council for the budget, and we got it approved in 2014 for 91.4.
So we started 75, though, correct?
We started 75, but 75 was conceptual. It had actually no design. It had not gone through a winning design, so there was no information to actually dictate whether it was 75 or 91. So the work that we did with the winning design was through that process that brought us to 91.4.
Did they use the term conceptual when the project was approved in 2010 and put in the budget?
I can look that up for you, Deputy Mayor.
So now we're up to 116 million, yes?
We are at 116. That is the request.
So that means that we've had a budget increase in this project of $41 million, which represents a 55% increase in the project.
Through the Speaker, that is correct.
So, well, I'm actually going to give you some information, Deputy Mayor, that is important to understand. In 2013, we were at 91.4. In 2017, 2018, we had requested to go to 102, and we did. And there was a lot of work around archaeological work that that was not part of any budget, and we came to council for that approval that got us to 102. Then we actually went to actual to market, and we're at 116 now, and the difference between the 102 and 116 is absolutely 90% of it has to do with construction costs in the market right now.
Well, firstly, just from a report writing arrangement, I don't see this in the summary. I don't see this in the financial implications. I have a certain level of concern that if you're, and I don't know this is to the deputy city manager or the city manager, that if you're going to be completely transparent and if you're going to give the financial analysis, that we should start from the original contract price. Is that, Mr. City Manager, is that an unreasonable proposition?
Through the speaker, I think on the surface, no, it's not an unreasonable way to communicate.
Right. So in the financial implications, we should be discussing that's been a 55% increase and it's $41 million over budget.
Through the speaker, so based on what we've heard, that's a reasonable conclusion.
Yeah. So this is not sort of the first project. We've got Union Station coming up. This seems to be, there seems to be reasons on many different capital projects. There seems to be different reasons all the time that we're running over budget. And this is not new to this chamber. I guess my question is, are there any projects that we're tracking that we should be concerned about that are going to exhibit significant cost overruns that we know about right now?
Through the speaker, the projects are in front of you, Deputy Mayor.
Pardon me?
The projects that are in front of you, this one in particular, and the Union Station one that we're going to be talking about. Now, I just want to say that there are links in this report that actually stipulate some of the changes that happened throughout 2009 till now. We will take your message around the financial impact piece and actually put it in there from now on.
Oh, no, I looked at the reasons. I wish we'd seen all those things at the front end to give council a clear position so that we weren't talking about cost coming back and asking for more money.
Okay, that was your last question.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Councillor Carroll?
Thanks, Madam Speaker. I did not open all of the links because it does go back, but I'm wondering if you can refresh my memory on how the recoverable debt matrix works. There's recoverable debt on this project that was there from the very beginning. That was sort of the impetus to even proceed at all, was starting out with almost $40 million in recoverable debt. Where's that recoverable from?
Through the speaker, the recoverable debt comes from, I guess, collapsing of leases through the court operations that are occurring in lease properties that will be moved into city-owned space. Additional revenues that will be generated through the parking facility beneath the building, as well as rental of units and different events that will be held in the North Market building.
Okay, so it does include that. So there was that added combination. So the recoverable debt has within it, it has the collapsed leases, but it also had parking revenue is in there. But the number there has never changed. Is it a matter when we do this, can we look at this as saying it's recoverable debt, but over a longer period of time for a different amount of money? Or is that number, does that number have to be static? We're talking about there's 40 million and there's only ever been 40 million, 39.7 in fact. And then there was also a cash contribution from TPA. But that recoverable amount has never changed, even though this is going up. Is there the possibility, would it be appropriate that we could also look at the end of the day, what is the total amount, and over a longer period of time, the business case is still there?
So we did, through the speaker, we did revisit the business case to ensure that the recoverable debt amounts would stay true, and they will. The incremental budget ask is being funded through an alternate sources, which is debt funding, so not the recoverable portion. So when we revisited the business case, there wasn't any more room for recoverable debt funding, which is why we had to look at other sources.
And the portion of that that's parking revenue, are we committed to that at a certain rate and a certain amount from TPA? Or the fact that this was really, the first conversation on this was back in 2008, 2009, and then and a lot has happened since then, and we've many times increased their rates. Is it a matter of whatever we're collecting at in there, a certain percentage will go to recoverable debt, or how does that play out?
Through the Speaker, you referred to the two streams, the cash contribution and the recoverable debt. The recoverable debt portion is driven by the contributions that are provided to the city from TPA on an annual basis through operating. So those ones through the revisit of the business case won't change. We are in discussions.
They could be revisited at the point of occupancy, perhaps?
Sure, and we've been in conversations with TPA about additional contributions to the project as a whole, given some of the items that you referenced in terms of rate changes, market changes, and whatnot. So we are having those conversations, and I believe we may have made reference to that in the report. Should any additional contributions come, then they would obviously offset any additional debt that we put towards the project.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Councillor Wong-Tam.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and through you to staff. How long has this project been on the books for the City of Toronto? When did the earliest conversations begin about the revitalization of the North Market?
Through the Speaker, Council approved in 2002 to review the development of the site.
And during that period of time, there was a number of conversations with stakeholders, including the users of the markets, I'm sure, broad consultation with the general community, reports back here to the City Council. This is not a short process.
No, there's been many milestones between 2002 and 2019. In 2004, Council approved the working committee, which brought together community stakeholders as well as staff, the neighborhood associations, to look at what could be done as a redevelopment. And through 2006 and 8, staff got together and worked with different divisions within the city and determined that court services was the best alternative use for the St. Lawrence Market North. In 2009, based on the input from the community and staff, Council approved a design competition, global design competition. In 2010, that was awarded. 2011, the contract was awarded to the design firm. In 2011, through 2013, design was underway on the St. Lawrence Market, but as well as we were designing also and building the temporary market to the south of the South Market. In 2017, we started the excavation and remediation archaeological works. That's when we had the delay and had to do the archaeological dig. So there have been milestones throughout the last 17 years.
And with respect to renderings and concepts and early projections to actual detailed designs and fixing the program in place, it would be expected to see some changes in the quantum of the estimates. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And when it comes to archaeological findings in the old city of Toronto, especially in the original portions of Toronto, how much say does the city have when we hit an artifact? The shovel has to be put down on the ground. Who places those orders, and when can we commence again?
Through the chair, archaeological assessment is a requirement of the Planning Act. So we are mandated to do that on archaeologically or heritage significant sites, and this is one.
And when the archaeological find took place, there's generally, I believe, some participation from the province.
There is.
And so there is a different team of individuals that have to come in to assess the site, to determine what is the appropriate treatment of those artifacts. And then how long did that take from the finding of the the stage 4 sort of a kickoff of the archaeological assessment to when you got permission to proceed with the normal order of construction? How long was that hesitation gap?
Approximately 2 years.
So about 2 years.
Approximately 2 years.
And during those 2 years, the contractor that was awarded the contract, sorry, the tender, what happened to that particular contractor? Did we stay with them? Did change? I mean, obviously, before us, we've got some changes here. Tell us that backstory here.
Through the chair, the contractor that was awarded the contract could not, as stated in the report, could not obtain the bonding required to undertake the project. Therefore, based on the city's procurement policies, the award was rescinded and the tender was canceled, and then we had to go back to do a pre-qualification and back to market.
And during that period of time, we've seen tariffs go up on construction materials. We've seen the cost of labor go up. There's all sorts of different impacts that have now come to force and bear, which is why we now have increased price to this project. Is that correct?
Through the speaker, that is correct.
Is there anything within your control? Could you have stopped the tariffs on aluminum and steel? Could you have stop the rising labor costs? Is there anything that we technically could have done to actually pull this project back from escalating costs?
Through the speaker, no, there is not.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, speakers. Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong, you held the item down.
No, I think I raised the issues that I needed to raise through questioning.
Okay. Councillor Wong-Tam to speak.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I do support the recommendations that came from staff. This is a very important project that was also acknowledged by the committee. I know that the members of the St. Lawrence community have been waiting in some cases for since the 1990s, although formal discussions began in the city in 2002. But I think it's important for us to sort of pull ourselves back from this discussion and think about this as a city building project. This is not simply just a farmer's market. This is very, very it's a much higher magnitude of a city building component that we need to think of. The St. Lawrence market has been noted for its world-class, high caliber experience for those who are visitors and tourists alike. And we have an opportunity, what I would call a once-in-a-generation opportunity to actually make it right. And we know that there's been long-term planning discussions of how to ensure that the St. Lawrence neighborhood, which is part of the downtown fabric, which is really part of Toronto, how do we ensure that we have these iconic institutions and assets that we actually refurbish and we make right by way of 21st century standards? This particular project, you get caught up, especially when you're dealing with public dollars. You don't get to bulldoze ahead without tendering it. You don't get to choose your best friends and say, I'm going to give you the contract. So there is a process around public accountability. And when you're dealing with public funds, it takes time. And perhaps the challenge here is sometimes we actually go for the lowest bid. And when that lowest bid doesn't quite line up with the other bids, that's the one we're compelled to take. But if the contractor can't finish the job for whatever reason, guess what? We've now got to use more time, more energy, and more money as we go off and tender again. In the broils of all of this, we also saw massive trade wars and the rising cost of construction. You heard from staff this project is now 17 years in the making. Of course there will be costs and escalation that they would not have foreseen. And of course there would be natural costs in rise of labor that they would not have, even if they had anticipated, they would not have been able to factor all of that in. I have myself been digging, I'm not personally digging, but we actually built a playground in Allen Gardens and we hit some artifacts. What started off as a 1.5-year probably construction period to end up being a 4-year project. And it cost more while we waited for the province to come back and give us approval to continue the construction. So this happens. And I think that we're getting to the final stages of getting this done. I think this is a very exciting project for everyone in Toronto. St. Lawrence Market remains a dynamic and world-class neighborhood that we should all be proud of. And this is another piece in all the different components, especially in the old part of Toronto, where when you come to the city, you've got to come in and visit here. This is very exciting. with the new courthouse, with all the different components coming in, I say to staff, speed ahead, let's get this done. For the community that's been waiting locally, they've been waiting for a very long time. For everybody else who's actually now seeing the hole in the site in St. Lawrence Market, even if you don't live there, you want this project complete, and I think that's what we have to do. Deliver the very best outcome for the residents of Toronto, something that we can be proud of right across the city. So thank you.
Any further speakers on the item? Okay. On the item? All in favor? Carried. Who asked for a recorded vote? Okay, recorded vote.
Councillor Perruzza, please. Councillor Perruzza, please.
The item is adopted 21-2.
Okay, our next item is on page 4, GL 4.14, use of cargo bikes. Councillor Layton held the item down. Do we have questions of staff? Anybody has any questions to staff? Councillor Layton, do you have questions to staff?
No.
Okay, to speak. Councillor Layton.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have a small motion that City Council requests the General Manager of Fleet Services and the General Manager of Parks, Forestry and Recreation in consultation with Locals 79 and 416 to consider the possibility of waiving the required CAN bike training program for the purpose of the pilot project, provided the bicycles are not used on public roads, and B, the possibility of working with the required city divisions to shorten the current CAN bike training program to half a day, similar to the city's G permit program for operating a motor vehicle. This originated with what is seen now as a widespread push to try to get low-carbon active transportation options for service vehicles. We know that Purolator, FedEx, Canada Post are all looking at these for use citywide. The genesis for this was a letter that I wrote last term that was actually connected to something the city of Edmonton was doing. And I thought it was a novel idea. I was wondering if it could be applied in Toronto. The city staff have done their due diligence and they're ready to launch a pilot in Allen Gardens to use a couple of cargo bikes for work within the park. And if you can imagine, if you've been in our parks recently, because of the weather, they're all dug up by the trucks going through them to do minor maintenance and repair. Like there's these ruts beside the pathways, and it's costing us money to fix. And like where they've got engines running to keep the cabs warm or cool or whatever, and they're really just, it's not necessary, or at least in my estimation, it's not necessary. And I think taking a look at the city's use of cargo bikes in some of our larger parks, you wouldn't have a small one, but if you had one in the large parks to help employees move stuff around. Not all employees will be able to benefit from this program. Not all parks will be able to benefit. It's not in my ward. I would much prefer it be at Christie Pitts or Trinity Bellwood, so I would see them more frequently, but I'll take staff's advice on this. The one point that I think staff needed a bit more direction on, and staff from Fleet helped me with this, is there was a requirement for city staff that to use bikes in the city to be CAN bike certified. And CAN bike certified is a good certification, but it takes 3 days. You can get a city license to operate a vehicle in a couple of hours. So while I think it's important, CAN bike is an incredibly important training program, I wouldn't want the pilot to be to to unfortunately probably not succeed simply because no one could use the bike. And so I would prefer, and I've reached out to the locals to see what their thoughts might be. I don't want to prescribe it here to waive it. I would prefer us have a collaborative relationship with them and to see if something's possible to lower the bar for this pilot to potentially succeed. Thank you.
Okay. We do have a question for you, Councillor Kerjanis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did have two, but the councillor answered the one that he reached out to the locals. I was wondering, has he spoken to staff regarding how does that reflect the agreement with the union and the contract, the employment contracts?
I have not, and that's why the request is really to consider. I didn't want to prescribe it because we were pretty far along with the pilot. I don't want to send it back. I would like to see it happen, and I think that given the relationship we have with 79 and 416, if we can make some consideration based on the contract, great. If we can't, then I'm prepared to just let it die at the staff level.
Would, through you, Chair, would Councillor Layton feel comfortable that we add a line in there that says, provided that this is agreed, it's agreeable in the contract?
I'd be careful with the language because right now it's required in the contract, but I suspect that was for permanent employees that were on roads, where this is specific to in-parks and just for the purpose of the pilot, and I think to also make it voluntary. I see where you're going, and it's my intent to not force this on the locals. If there's any appetite from the speaker, if we want to hold it down for a couple minutes, I can probably make a change.
If the councillor wants to make an amendment, he can make it on his own.
Why not say just, if I might answer your question with a proposal that that as a friendly amendment we change in consultation with to with agreement of.
Fantastic, super. Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
So that it would read, City Council requests the General Manager. I'm just reading it back for the clerks. Fleet Services and the General Manager of Parks, Forestry, Recreation with the agreement of locals 79 and 416.
With consultation and agreement?
With consultation and agreement? Sure.
Councillor Carroll, did you have a question to Councillor Layton?
You don't need to do that.
Councillor Carroll, what is it?
No, thank you. No, thank you. I'm going to leave it.
Okay.
No, thank you.
Okay, so we have the motion by Councillor Layton. On favor? Carried. Item as amended. On favor? Carried. Page 5. PH 5.1. The right to adequate housing. Councillor Wong-Tam, you held the item down. Questions of staff?
No, just to speak.
Does anybody have any questions of staff? We're planning and housing. No? Councillor Wong-Tam to speak.
To speak. Yes, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I want to rise and just acknowledge the good work that's actually happening in Planning and Housing Committee, led by our esteemed chair, Councillor Bailao, Deputy Mayor Bailao, I should say. It was a very, very good meeting, as Deputy Mayor Bailao has stated earlier as she introduced the minutes of our meeting. Not only did we have Lalani Farha, who is the UN Rapporteur on Adequate Housing, appear before us, that was also the same week as the launch of a very important documentary called The Push that really helped highlight how housing can be repositioned in all our legislative framework and all our planning documents and how we develop policies with a rights-based approach. And I think she really helped demystify what that means for the committee. And I think certainly the staff that were present also learned a few things. What's also important is that film was received with great acclaim. I think that it really does help explain a number of things that are happening in the City of Toronto, including including the housing crisis. One of the components of her film that is absolutely critical for us to understand, and it will help us understand why we are in the throes of this housing crisis, is this rampant global commodification of housing. It is no longer just a speculator here or there, or perhaps the local developer. These are massive investment trusts that are coming in, and the capital is global. They know no boundaries, and they are literally coming into neighborhoods such as Parkdale and other areas, and they are gobbling up what they see as underperforming assets. And this is all happening under our nose. And so while we have pressures and we're seeing the shelters full, and we're seeing the number of people struggling and panicking for affordable housing, we need to rethink how we are going to build the next 10-year housing plan. And I think that the way we need to do that is exactly as it is now being proposed in New York City and Barcelona and other world-class cities. And this is also happening at the federal level. The national government has adopted a human rights approach to housing. They have signed on to international agreements that this is how we should actually position the policy and the thinking and the building of housing in Canada. All of that means is that when those monies are available for grants, we need to, as a subnational government, municipalities as well as provinces, start to position our thinking and our policies the way the federal government has. And so that's a really good sign, because I think that there is hope. There is a way for us to not just build our way out of it, because that's actually not going to work. Clearly, it's been demonstrated that it's not a supply issue to our housing crisis, because if it was, I know that in Midtown, in Yonge and Eglinton, in the downtown core, and in Councillor Filion's area in North York, where there is rampant development, oftentimes unchecked, where we've already exceeded the volume of housing that we need, and based on the development pipeline, and yet affordability is not in any of those considerations. So this, to me, is a very important pivotal point in our discussion, and I'm extremely proud of the committee's work and approach to positioning housing as a right. And I think that when we go out to public consultation, which is already happening, led by Sean Gadden and the Deputy Mayor, I think what we need to do is make sure that when the report comes back and the recommendations come back, we have to rethink and reposition housing as a right. Everybody should have access to basic housing. We're not talking about glamorous palaces, but they should not be living on the street. They should not be living in the ravines, and we have to meet people where they are. And if that means people need supportive housing and rooming houses, we have to have the widest range of affordable housing. And I also think that we need to redefine what affordability is, and when it pertains to housing in Toronto. It has to be indexed and marked to people's actual incomes, and not necessarily to the average market rent. Those two shifts alone will make a huge difference. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Perks to speak.
Thank you, Speaker. A time is going to come when we look back on this day and are really, really proud of ourselves. I want to begin by acknowledging the role that Councillor Bailão took on this in her capacity as chair of the Planning and Housing Committee. Inviting in the UN Special Rapporteur gave all of us on the Planning and Housing Committee new insight into why the affordability crisis is happening in the City of Toronto. I'm just going to tell you a couple of very quick stories about things going on in my ward. Many of you will have heard me talk about the Wynn Group, one of the most difficult, awful landlords in the City of Toronto. And what they had done is basically cash-cowed the buildings they were in. They had run them down, stopped reinvesting. We recently had to go in with the TSSA and the fire chief and turn off the electrical systems for 1,500 people because they had run it into the ground. Well, you know what they did? They looked around the world and they said it's easy to move big sums of capital around. They took all their money out of Toronto and went and bought up a bunch of buildings in Buffalo and Western New York, and they're going to cash cow those. And what came in after them is a different firm that has a different model. It's called Timber Creek. And what Timber Creek does, they actually talk about this. They wash assets, which means they come in, they buy in underinvested housing, put in some money, upgrade it a bit, bring it up to a standard, and when a unit goes vacant, they keep it vacant until they've upgraded the property, and then they put it back in a non-rent controlled market at a much higher rent. And all of a sudden, they've got a big flow of revenue, and they stay and do that until they've recovered their investment, and then they move along to the next one. What happens to the people who are living there is a lot of them lose the only place they could afford to live in the city of Toronto. It's actually one of the places where people from streets to homes would get housed. And that's gone. Another little story. I had a development application, modest little development. The developer came in, got the property zoned up, and then sold it. And then they sold it to another guy, who sold it to another guy, who sold it to another guy. We're on the fourth owner before somebody actually builds something. Every single one of the guys in the chain, though, made money. Every single time. The housing crisis that we're facing now, as we learned at committee, these stories about how land speculation and asset washing is accelerating globally as money moves faster in a digitized and deregulated global housing market. And remembering that housing is close to half of the world economy. It's half of where these large financial entities, these real estate income trusts, and financial instruments that bundle mortgages, they're all recognizing that a way to make a quick return is to inflate local real estate prices. And that, more than any issue having to do with supply, is why we have an affordable housing crisis in the city of Toronto. And as we move towards November, when we have our new housing opportunities plan, Mr. Gadden and his team are beavering away at diligently, I'm sure, today we will give a direction to them saying, when you design our housing program, be mindful of these issues. Remember, housing isn't like buying potato chips. It's one of the necessities of life, and our housing system has to be designed to reflect that. So congratulations to Councillor Bailao and all the members of the Planning and Growth Committee for bringing this to us, and I hope we get a very strong vote in favor.
On the item, all in favor, carried. Recorded vote. Okay, well, recorded vote. No, it's just that nobody is sitting at their seat.
Councillor Wong-Tam, please. Councillor Carroll, please.
The item is adopted unanimously, 22 in favor.
Page 5, PH 5.3. Councillor Wong-Tam, do you have questions? Creating affordable rental homes at West Downlands. Do we have any questions? No? Okay, Councillor Wong-Tam to speak.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I rise again in support of this this particular report, and I wanted to set a few things straight out in the general public. There was an announcement by the Ford government on April 29th as a day before they basically announced the fact that they're also bringing back the OMB. And at that point in time, they said, look, this is what they're doing. They're unlocking land in Grosvenor, Grenville, and they're going to build some affordable housing, which we can all get behind. Every single last one of us can get behind this. What they didn't acknowledge is that this announcement was already made September 13th, 2017, by the Liberal government. And I know that in the West Don Lands community, I proudly stood with Mayor Tory, with Councillor Bailao, as well as Councillor Paula Fletcher, and some of the MPPs at that time. And that's when they announced that they were going to create up to 2,000 units of affordable housing, both between the West Don Lands and at this particular site at Grenville Grosvenor. That was not mentioned in their press announcement earlier this April. What they also didn't mention, and I think I need to say this, is that my local community, and I now share this with Councillor Layton, the Bay Clover Hill Community Association worked so hard for years. This affluent community worked hard with myself. We went to visit Infrastructure Ontario. We wrote letters to different ministers of municipal affairs and housing. We wrote letters to the Premier at that time, and we said, we know that you have this parcel of land that's held by Infrastructure Ontario, and we want you to not just sell it off to the highest and best use bidder. So therefore, we don't necessarily need more condominiums on Bay Street. What we need is some form of affordable housing. We need green space, and we want to work with you. To their great credit, they don't generally do this, but to their great credit, they listened, and they were shifting their policies around to make sure that when they unlocked government-owned land, just as we are doing now, when they unlocked government-owned land, they were going to make sure that it had some city building components and it was going to meet their priorities. And so even though it was not said at the Ford announcement, April 29, 2019, I need to say it today. I want to thank then Premier Wynne and her government for listening and responding to the local community. I want to thank the officials at Infrastructure Ontario who worked with our office, as well as the office of Councillor Bailao, as well as the Affordable Housing Committee, as well as the Director of Affordable Housing, our office here, to make sure that they heard the requests of the local community. I also want to thank the Bay Clover Hill Community Association because they were quite visionary. They got in front of this project and said they needed to see affordable housing in their community, that it cannot just be only market condominiums. So that was not said in April 2019, but I felt that it's important for Council, as they approve this project, to really understand who got behind all of that. And it took a long time, but it was truly a good news story, and I really wish that the announcement actually included all those particular actors, those political actors and community actors that really made this happen. Thank you very much.
On the item, recorded vote.
Councillor Karygiannis, please.
The item is adopted unanimously, 21 in favor.
Okay. Page 5, PH 5.6, Councillor Holliday, you held the item down, vital service disruptions in apartment buildings. Do you have questions of staff? Okay, Councillor Holliday, questions of staff.
Just looking to see who's here that might be able to.
Behind
right,
you.
Mr. Grant is there. Thank you for your report on this. The report gets into a couple of major basic themes. I'll give you a second to get in your spot there. But if I've got it right, it talks a lot about maintenance standards, electrical maintenance standards, and then some plans and communication plans and contact lists. Would I be correct in summarizing that it's the basic nature of your report? gives council some advice on maybe moving forward on how to implement or operationalize those ideas.
Yeah, conceptually that's accurate. What we're trying to do is leverage an apartment bylaw. Sorry. That's correct. As you can contextualize it, what we're trying to do is leverage an apartment building bylaw we have to introduce some of these new items.
Right, and I think I remember the council debate was around here about a contact list, just a simple list of who lives where and who might need help evacuating, that type of thing. You had some recommendations in your report. I think there were 4 of them. There was a number of additional recommendations added at the committee. Were those something that came out of the report or developed by you, or were they something that was just the genesis was at the committee?
The genesis was at the committee. They were shared with staff. It's something we are looking at right now with our colleagues in Fire and the Office of Emergency Management, and we'll be reporting back next month on a number of those items.
So maybe this is just a general landlord question. Some of the requirements that were contained in the list for you to examine, some of the additionals that were added at the committee were things like the landlord providing temporary accommodation if there was an evacuation or disruption, bottled water, food, snacks, blankets, all of those kinds of things. Do we have any laws, or are there any examples of this level of service that we would look to a landlord to provide?
So this is a report request, so we are looking into all these things, and if we agree with things, we'll bring them forward. If we disagree, we will say why. There are an emergency preparedness that all of us are responsible for in our own lives, in our own homes, that is by our own Office of Emergency Management, and there's also the Residential Tenancies Act. So there are a couple different pieces of legislation that guide us, and we will report back on the feasibility of those, and if they are too onerous, we will make that comment.
What happens, according to the way this is written, what happens if there's a general power outage in the area? Would I be correct in interpreting the asks of the committee of the landlords on this report request is that, the landlord needs to step in and start taking additional roles? And have you had any feedback from the landlord community about providing those level of services?
We have, yes. It will be challenging. We need to understand what that impact is and work with them. But again, we also have to look at, each individual, what you have to be responsible for in the first 72 hours. There are some pieces that we can bring forward as educational pieces in our next report.
Would it be fair to say that there are different circumstances when things unfold? Sometimes there are issues that happen inside a building, and you can trace it back. You might even be able to blame the landlord for the unfolding of a situation that causes the building power to be shut off or a fire or such. But there's other situations that really has nothing to do with the landlord. Or maybe it's just truly an accident where there's a fire or something in a building. Are there any other cases or examples in history where governments place the onus on the landlord to deal with all those circumstances? And how would they fare? How could they bank money to pay for the temporary accommodations or stockpile emergency supplies, and where would they keep it? Do we have any precedent of that?
I can't think of a specific example. There may be, so I can't reference one specifically. It is something we will look at. It is a significant cost, and the feasibility of doing this, again, is the body of work that we're taking away to look at and to understand the impacts on landlords. But we also want the tenants to have, again, the appropriate housing.
And the last question, presumably there's cost to do all this. You could look at what private insurance costs for a tenant to give you some concept of the level of risk and what it would take to carry that risk. Is there mechanisms in any of our policies here for landlords to pass these costs on to the tenants who effectively they're insuring through these type of plans and mechanisms and requirements in place? Or do the landlords have to absorb that, and how could they ever recover those costs?
That was your last
Right.
question.
So we are working with the insurance board to understand contents insurance versus tenant insurance. We are looking at that. You are correct that it could be a significant amount, and the cost could be passed on to the tenants.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Through you to staff, you would agree that vital services and statistics and information and so on would be required, not just simply for landlords and property renters and so on?
Absolutely, yes.
Right. So, and I realize the theme of this with respect to, apartment buildings and rental and so on, but I wanted to examine perhaps a bigger picture. We had the ice storm a few years ago. There were many people in their homes that needed services and or needed assistance, but we as a city, we don't have any type of information that helps us to understand, for example, a senior who lives alone and isn't able to get out, doesn't drive, and has no electricity, no power, water wasn't running, or what have you. I'm just wondering whether or not we shouldn't be looking at this in a much more wholesome, a larger way for the city to deal with some of these issues. Would you agree that this perhaps needs to be much more focused in terms of responding to the vital service needs of our residents when there are times of emergencies?
Yes, that's a fair question, and we do need to look at it broader. The reason this is here is because of the incidents that focused it, and that's why we've...
No, and I appreciate that. So I just wanted to see, and so recognizing what this is, and so if I were to bring a motion, and I think it'd probably be a member's notice of motion dealing with this broader perspective, because we've been thinking about it for some time. I just wanted to get your perspective, though, in terms of whether or not you think that this city should be doing more to ensure that we understand who in our respective wards and neighborhoods would need specific assistance during times of major emergencies.
At the last council meeting when this was brought up, it was determined that it should be a voluntary list, not mandatory. So people do have the right to their own privacy and whether they share that they are vulnerable or not. But I think it is important that we help people, but we need to understand what the scope of that is.
But with great respect, you're not providing that as sort of a voluntary basis for the landlord for the rental properties, are you? You're suggesting that we look at establishing such?
We're suggesting establishing a list in each apartment buildings, voluntary, in the event that you need help to get down the set of stairs or you may need assistance.
So would the services provided like water and other things, supplies that you talk about through the question of Councillor Deputy Mayor Holiday, would that be voluntary as well?
So that is a piece of work that we need to do. It's not necessarily voluntary. Again, each landlord, what we're trying to look at is what the preparedness each individual has to have for kind of 72 hours, and then and moving on from there.
No, but I think just so that I can understand this, it's my understanding that you kind of intimated that landlords will be responsible, right?
We are going to
is
use
that what
the
you're actually
apartment
saying?
building bylaw to have the landlords be responsible to have a list of tenants who they can communicate with to educate them on what's happening in their building.
If the tenants choose to participate.
That's correct.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Paula.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Speaker. So we have this report.
Hold on. Whose phone is ringing?
Of course, Anthony.
Like Councillor Peruzza, you've been on the phone all day. Yeah. Seriously? Like, if you want to speak on yourself, please, if you can leave the council chambers and go out to the back, you're more than welcome to do that. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. So the reason why we have this report in front of us because we had a few incidents lately in the City of Toronto, correct?
That's correct.
And a lot of those incidents were because of lack of maintenance in some of these parts, correct?
Correct, and a lot of the buildings, the apartment rental stock in the city is older than 1977, which is when the electoral code was changed to allow these defaults. So there are older buildings that have issues, yes.
And this is actually a risk that we have in the city in terms of the resilience of the city, because we have a large number of these buildings, and so we're trying to proactively address some of these situations, correct?
That's correct.
Did these incidents cost the city any money?
There would be costs for our staff to be out there, to investigate, to audit, yes.
Okay. And all the long list of issues that you were asked to look at, it was actually provided by a member of the committee that experienced this scenario, and it's just a long list of things that have been asked, that have been compiled and asked you to look at it. So it's based on experience, based on what the community needed, and a request for you to look at the many issues that arise during these situations. Correct?
That's correct. And I asked the question of my staff today of why it was so long, and it was because it was crowdsourced with all the people that were impacted. So we have to look at all of the areas and come back to you on what pieces we can include and which ones we can't, and
So
with,
this is
with a
actually
rationale.
quite helpful for you, because based on the unfortunate experience that we've already had in our city, there was somebody that actually crowdsourced all this information, provided it to you based on real scenarios and situations that happened, for you to take a look at it to see if we can be helpful in future situations that we hope not to be there, but we're trying to be proactive and be prepared, correct?
That's correct. It's just very compressed timelines.
And the other thing that we're doing as well is to actually prevent the risk or minimize the risk for the city, because this could go into millions of dollars that the city has to provide of assistance if we don't work with landlords and tenants to not only maintain our buildings, but have plans in case this situations arise, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Holliday to speak.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'll be quite brief on it. I'm just going to ask to separate out the votes on 5B and 5C. And the reason for this is this is a bit of a balancing act. I very much followed and respect the unfolding of some of the incidences that were the genesis of the report, and I've got an emergency planning background amongst some of the work that I've done in my past. But there's a bit of a balance in what you ask of landlords, because we also want to be a city that encourages landlords to get in the business of owning and renting out buildings. And I know we've talked a lot about smaller landlords and some of the other council policies, but there are the larger buildings, and medium-sized buildings may be contemplated by this policy. I just find it's a little bit much to ask landlords to begin to play the role of insuring or taking on responsibilities that traditionally fall to the tenants. And specifically in here, there's things about providing food, providing blankets, paying for hotel accommodations, and the like. And there are some very good things mixed into the motions. Please don't take it that they're all bad. I just find that those are a fairly high bar. And for the same reason that I don't think it's palatable for this council to mandate that every tenant carry insurance on the contents of their apartments that would handle this type of a situation, I'm not sure we should force that down onto the landlords, because ultimately somebody has to pay for it, and ultimately that's probably the tenants at the end of the day. I realize it's a report request. And MLS is going to look at this and look at a lot of the heavy communications and lists and things that we have asked them to look at on this. But just sending the signal from council, I think, is one that we should be aware of. I'm sure there are landlords watching this and are adding that to their column of decisions that they're trying to make when trying to choose the tenure of their next project, whether it be condominium or apartment building. I just want to be careful with the standards that we're asking them to live up to. They all translate to costs. I'm not sure they are always there and ready to be available when the situation occurs. And even the way this is written, there could be a civil disruption of power or energy. And we know from the advertising from the Government of Canada, we're all supposed to be resilient ourselves for 72 hours, as Mr. Grant brought up. So even sending the message that we're going to transfer that responsibility to somebody else and, look, you don't have to worry about it anymore, I think is heading down the wrong path, and perhaps is even counter to the spirit of emergency preparedness. So for that reason, I'm just going to ask that those two subcomponents be separated out. I can't support those. I can support the balance of the report and the recommendations coming forward. I think they're excellent, and I think they will make us a more resilient city, and we will see these emergencies unfold and be responded to in better ways once some of these mechanisms are in place. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wong-Tam.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And as the author of the committee recommendations, so the ones that were added to the staff recommendations, a little bit of background might be very helpful, Madam Speaker, for the members of Council. 650 Parliament, I think we can all agree, was a catastrophic disaster. And that disaster has left 1,500 individuals, residents of Toronto, without a home. And they have now been without a home for close to 10 months. They're going on about a year, and what we're hearing is that they may not come back even as they hit the 1-year mark. What we learned was that we just weren't ready. And it's not about necessarily making the landlord do everything, but what we weren't ready for was a landlord that didn't know what to do. And that same property owner had another property at 260 Wellesley where the building went dark. And I know that, Mayor Tory was out there in the evening. I was out there in the evening, as well as an incredible number of first responders trying to make sense of the absolute chaos. And once again, that same property owner, the same one, the one that didn't do well with the emergency planning for 650 Parliament, you figure that they would have learned a few things. They were not ready for the 5-day, almost 6-day blackout at 260 Parliament. At that particular point in time, the Deputy Chief of Toronto Police made a call because the shelters were literally full. There was no one to place anybody. There were only about 300 hotel rooms that were available if we were to move them into a hotel. The call was made that to keep them in the dark. In the code in January, where it was going down to -30 and -25, is to keep people in the dark, without water, without power, in a building with vulnerable people, with people living with illness, with people living with mobility challenges, is to keep them in the dark rather than put them on the streets or find a hotel room. There was just no adequate planning. So this particular set of recommendations, I recognize it's long, but it really came out of so many different conversations that I had with the local community and the first responders. Because they were all trying to figure out how to make sense of a chaotic situation, and you didn't have a landlord that was proactive. So there are costs to 650 Parliament. There are costs to 260 Wellesley. And those costs, how are we going to recover them? I'm going to tell you. We're going to have to sue them. I think we're going to have to find and initiate some legal claims. And the number of resources, the amount of resources that this city spent, this council spent to take care of a landlord that wasn't doing their job, I suspect it's going to be into the millions, easily. So somebody's got to pay. You're right. Absolutely somebody's got to pay. I don't think that it should be exclusively the tenants, especially for a building that's not well managed, where it was confirmed for us that the electrical system had not been inspected for decades. I don't believe at all that the landlord, that the bar is too high, that they've done too much, the burden is too great. When all I'm asking for is staff to consider all the information that we've gathered and ask us, is this doable? Can we implement it? Is this something that will work for everybody, including the City of Toronto and the taxpayers of Toronto, who are going to have to pay the bill if we don't recover some of the costs that we spent to make sure that the residents were okay and taken care of? And it had everything to do with the fact that everything we had to ask for was an ask. We had to ask for blankets. We had to ask for water. We had to ask for security. We had to ask for just about everything. It was a negotiation every step of the way. It was frustrating, darn frustrating. And it was unfair to the residents because we were not ready to deal, well, we were ready to deal with the situation, but the landlord was not ready to deal with his situation. And that is what I think is the most frustrating thing for the residents of St. Jamestown. And knowing that we are going to be looking at an aging building stock across the city. When it happens in your community, there's a very good chance you're going to look back on this day and said, I'm really glad that Councillor Wong-Tam and the community and the first responders and MLS and everybody else came together and figured it out then, so that you didn't have to make it up on the fly when the catastrophe lands in your community and neighborhood. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So Councillor Holliday wants a separate, Councillor Thompson. You'll
Thank
be
you.
the last speaker, then we have
Thank you very much, Speaker.
Okay.
I just wanted to rise and to thank Councillor Wong-Tam for obviously initiating a lot of this. We saw her and her community when these incidents occurred, and for any of us who've had anything such as an emergency situation in our community, we had a fire in my area where a man actually died, and the landlord himself had, he and his partner were some place we don't know where to this date, and the residents needed assistance, and the city did come to their assistance, and as I said, someone died. And clearly, to the magnitude that the councillor had experienced with the two respective building in her area, mine was not anywhere near that in terms of the number of people that were impacted. But as I indicated earlier, Madam Speaker, someone actually died in the fire that took place in my ward. We actually had to seek out the assistance of a hotel in the Warden and the 401 area to help to put residents up, because there was no opportunity in terms of getting in touch with the landlord. I do think that as we realize throughout the city, we have lots of older stock of rental units that are in need of repair. And it's not just the downtown core. It is out in the west end, it's out in the east end, it's in the north end of the city. I do think that we need to do something about this, and I think this is a step in the right direction. I don't think that we're suggesting any means that simply that we're going to put the burden and onus so much on the landlord. But if we are, we have to do that in a balanced way, because at the end of the day, we know that all of the costs will be passed back on to the tenants. But if landlords are taking care of their properties, we wouldn't find ourselves in these particular conditions. And I think that is part of what the messaging here is. I think it's important for us to also know whether or not there are elderly residents in these buildings, and what floors they're located, what units they're in, and how we offer assistance to them. I do think as well there is a broader requirement, in fact, to ensure that across the city we do something similar to residential properties in our respective wards. During the ice storm, I found personally a number of residents who were off in age and who were still living in their homes, but because of the emergency at that time with the ice storm, they were not able to get out. They were not able to get assistance and so on. Lucky thing that I knew where some of them lived, and we were able to provide, whether or not it's coffee, water, and some assistance to them. I think as a city, we are going to have to be aware and be mindful of these requirements, because of the fact that global warming is upon us, and lots of environmental changes are taking place in our respective cities and our towns and our neighborhoods and so on. So I think we need to be aware of this. And I just simply wanted to thank the councillor. I saw the pain, I saw the problem. Because some of those people that lived in your area actually came to mind as well, because the relatives lived in the area, so they were trying to seek shelter and accommodation. And I did meet a number of them, and I saw the pain in terms of their expression and their emotions. I saw the young children who were impacted by this. So this, in my view, Madam Speaker, is a step in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so Councillor Holliday has asked that we vote on 5B and 5C separately. So we're 5B and 5C, recorded vote.
Councillor Bailão, please.
Parts 5B and C are adopted 22-2.
On the item, on favor, recorded vote.
Councillor Bailão, please.
The balance of the item is adopted unanimously, 24 in favor.
Quick releases before we recess. Councillor Fletcher.
Yes, Speaker, it's page 8, and it's CC 7.2, terms of appointment for Toronto's lobbyist registrar. And clerks have a motion to move A, extend her term, to finish her normal
Okay.
time.
To do what?
To finish her term,
So, sorry, how many more?
to finish her term with
Oh,
the
sorry.
regular 7 years of her term,
Oh, okay.
rather than cut it short at 3.
Oh, I agreed. Oh, okay.
Okay, so on CC 7.2, the amendment is there on favor, carried. All right, Councillor Crawford.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It was a new item, so it's not on any one of the pages. It's SC 6.4, Traffic and Parking Amendments, Kingston Road, Brimley Road, and Barkdean Hills. It was circulated.
Okay, so you've moved on favor, carried. Councillor Fletcher, we are there. Councillor Layton.
Yes, thank you very much. This is on page 9, CC 7.10, 129 to 131 McCall Street, 292 to 294 Dundas Street West. There was an amendment circulated, but it was confidential.
Yes, we have it.
That amends the instructions. So if everyone's had a chance to take a look, if I could
Just move it.
move
Okay.
the amendment.
On the amendment, on favor, carried. Item is amended, on favor, carried. Okay, so we just have, yeah. So, Councillor Carroll, did you want to release CC 7.12? Deputy Mayor Min Wong, did you? No? Okay. All right. We do have a motion that I'd like to add before we recess. Okay? On favor, carried. Thank you. Recorded? We're just introducing it. Recorded vote. So am I going to see that you're not my friend? No, but Councillor Peruzza said this will show you who your friends are.
The motion to add the item carries unanimously, 24 in favor.
I have a lot of friends. Councillor Bradford, you have a motion to introduce the confirming bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Motion here that leave be granted to introduce a bill to confirm to the point of the introduction of this motion the proceedings of City Council Meeting 7 on May 14, 2019.
Shall leave be granted to introduce this bill? Recorded vote.
Councillor Wong-Tam, please.
Councillor Layton, please, your vote.
The motion to introduce the confirming bill carries unanimously, 24 in favor.
Bill be passed and declared as a bylaw. Recorded vote.
Councillor Matlow, Councillor Karygiannis, Councillor Bailao, please.
Councillor Perks, please. And Councillor Perruzza, please.
The motion to enact the confirming bill carries unanimously, 24 in favor.
Okay, members of council, CC 7.3 was just distributed to members of council. That will be our item tomorrow morning. Recess till tomorrow at 9:30. Your homework is to read CC 7.3.